Okay, so good morning and welcome to Political Liaison for November 28th. First, going to begin with identifying any media on the line.
Hi, Donna from the Truro Times.
Good morning, Donna. Are there any representatives from the Turtle Island News? Okay, seeing or hearing none, that'll move us in to our adoption of our agenda, looking to any changes or additions or deletions. We have a long agenda today.
I'll move it, Chief Sherlyn.
Okay, thanks for that, Sherlyn. It's moved by Sherlyn, seconded by Audrey. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. We do have a delegation again this morning, a couple actually. Our first one is going to be our Director of Public Works, Michael Montour, who's on the line and will be walking us through our bridge and culvert inspection summary presentation. Good morning, Michael, and I'll pass the floor over to yourself.
Thank you, everyone. So we've gotten our consultant on hand that did the actual inspections for us to run us through a quick presentation here. So I'd like to introduce Curtis Stewart from McIntosh Perry Consulting Engineers. We've been working with Curtis for quite some time now to make sure that our infrastructure is maintained and looked after properly. So go ahead, Curtis.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen here. As Michael said, I put together a presentation him and I worked on that basically runs through a summary here. So let me know when you can see this. Good? Excellent. So I'll try to keep it brief. I understand you have a lot of things to cover here. So as Michael said, I am here to talk about sort of a summary of what we have covered in our 2022 inspection of the bridges and culverts on the Six Nations of the Grand River. So I'll quickly walk through what we have here. So just first a quick introduction. So I'm with McIntosh Perry. We've been working with Six Nations for nearly a decade now. We are a multidisciplinary engineering firm. We do offer services across Canada and the US, but our largest presence is here in Ontario. We specialize in all sorts of things, but primarily infrastructure, bridges, roads, and associated work. So that's where we've been doing most of our work with Six Nations to date. Myself, I've been with McIntosh Perry for more than 11 years. I'm a licensed engineer in Ontario and Alberta, and I've been working with Michael and with Six Nations on every job that we've done with Six Nations for, like I said, since 2013, nearly a decade now. So first, I just wanted to touch on what the structural inspections are intended to do. So there is an Ontario regulation that was introduced in 1997 that essentially requires all structures that are greater than 3 meters to be inspected on a biannual basis, so every 2 years. It essentially will look at each structure from an element to element point of view. So looking at everything that makes up the structure, assessing it as an individual element, and then sort of using all of that information to take it all together to tell you sort of on the whole what the condition of that structure is. So how the inspection is supposed to happen follows a very well adopted manual, the OSIM, Ontario Structure Inspection Manual, and it has to be done so under the supervision of a structural engineer. The intention of this report and this inspection is to essentially identify all maintenance needs and capital needs that the structure requires in order to keep it in good working condition and safe for the public. So Six Nations has been following this as a best practice to ensure public safety. The initial, when we get into some of the looking back at previous inspections, initially we were on sort of a 3 to 4 year cycle as there was a priority given to doing some of the repairs. But in recent years, we are going biannually every 2 years to look at these structures. So just continuing on sort of the inspections from the big picture. So the end result of these inspections is every structure, both bridges and culverts, gets what's called a Bridge Condition Index rating, or a BCI, which is essentially a rating out of 100. So general rule is, if you built a brand new bridge, it should theoretically be rated 100. And then over time, as it's exposed to, traffic and weather and everything, it will slowly deteriorate. That's natural. So the BCI will help you identify when it makes the most sense to repair the structure, to spend money on it so that you're getting the most value for your money. You're not letting it get into very poor condition and then having to spend more than maybe you should have wanted to. And you're also not spending money too soon when it's still in good condition. So as a general rule, anything in the 80s and above is excellent. In the 70s, it's good. And then under 70, you get into fair and even poor below that. So like I said, once we have the BCI and you can look at all of the structures in an inventory, then you can sort of decide what the priorities are, how you want to best spend money to repair them and to keep for upkeep. So ideally, just anecdotally, it's when bridges are in sort of the 70-75 range. That's when you start to look at repairing them, just because that's when you get the best value for money. So now I'm going to talk about the structures of Six Nations just in more detail. So Six Nations has an inventory of approximately 40 structures. So that's 19 bridges and 21 culverts. It's fluctuated, as I know that there's some sort of on the bordering lines that are shared. So it's in and around that 40 structures. McIntosh Perry has completed the inspections in 2013, 17, 2020, and again, just this past year in 2022. So looking at the structures and sort of the year of construction to give a sense of how old the structures are, you have approximately 50% of them that were built in the 50s and 60s. We do have some that are far newer in sort of the 2020 to present day, and that comes from a lot of what I'll touch on and some of the work that we've done together over this past decade working together. But this kind of gives you a sense of big picture what the age of the structures are. So back in 2013, when we first did our initial inspections, this is essentially what we found. So you had one structure that was in the 90s. You ended up having the majority in the 70s, which is fairly common. But what really stood out was there were 5 structures that were 60 and below. And like I said, once you're sort of around 70, that's when you want to start looking at spending money on them. So these 5 structures highlighted here in pink, those were the highest priority. So that's what we jumped on right away. And in that year and sort of in the years to follow, we worked with Michael and his team to complete the rehabilitation of bridge number 18. And we began design on replacing 2 bridges, bridges 5 and bridges 9. So those, after we did those inspections, those were sort of priority number 1 that we tackled. Continuing into 2017, obviously you'll see that some more ticked up into the 90s because that's where when you start getting these new structures. So they move out of these low rated areas, which now we have 0, and they get improved. Some of the ones that get rehabbed, they don't necessarily jump all the way up into the 80s and 90s. It might take them from 50s up to 70s. So you start to see that there's more, the overall health of the structures starts to become a lot better. Getting into 2020, again, you start to see some more in the 80s as we continue to work on these structures, and you see that overall they are trending in the right direction. And then again, this being 2022 here on the right, you'll see that there are now you have 7 structures in that 80 and 90 range. You still have a bunch in the 70s, which is again to be expected as they do age. But ultimately, the ones that were the highest priority have been addressed and are no longer a concern. So again, this is just sort of an image to illustrate it all together, but not anything we need to dive into in too much detail. So in terms of progress, just to kind of summarize a few major things. So the structures rated over 80, initially there was 1 structure, 3%. That is now up to nearly 20% of the structures in the inventory are in excellent condition. On the flip side of that, you get structures that were under 60. We have now taken care of those ones that were of the highest importance, the ones that were most critical. Those are now addressed. Those have been rehabbed and in good shape. When you look at the overall health of the structures, you'll see that in 2013, the average structure was at 70, and that's come up almost 5 points in the 9 years that we've been working on these. So you do see that overall the general health of the structures is far better. Since 2013, we've undertaken 3 bridge replacements, 2 bridge rehabs, and 3 culvert replacements, and that's just what's been completed to date. I'll touch on what we're looking at moving forward. And just with all of this information that we've gathered over the last 4 inspection cycles, we have a lot better handle on the priority structures and the ability to work with Michael and help plan on what needs to be addressed next. So next, I just want to take a quick walk through the summary of capital work that we have for Six Nations coming out of the 2022 inspections. So out of the inspections of the 40 structures this year, there were essentially 12 structures that we identified with a need in the next 1 to 5 years. And just quickly, I'll touch on that. When we look at all of these structures, we do the inspections. We are not only saying what has to be done to the structure, but also approximately when should it happen. So obviously things that are more urgent, we would put in that sort of 1 to 5 year range. It can be even more urgent than that if required, but there was nothing that met that criteria. And then there's also ones that are on a longer term scale, so 6 to 10 or even 10 plus years. So there were 12 structures that we identified that just based on their need and timing of the work, we would recommend being done in the next 1 to 5 years. So the approximate cost of those 12 structures we have at over $5 million, somewhere between $5 and $6 million. That would include design, the construction costs, the contract administration, everything that kind of gets wrapped up into it. It does make some assumptions on the condition, and obviously what a bridge needs today versus what it might need in 5 years from now will change, just because these structures are aging and undergoing changes with traffic and weather and everything over time. In addition to the 1 to 5 year time frame, we have 4 structures that were looked at in the 6 to 10 year time frame with about $1.25 million worth of work. So that was sort of the big picture takeaway of those structures. And I have here a list of the structures, the priority, again, the timing that you see on the side, and a map just identifying the ones in red are the ones that are the 1 to 5 year time frame. The ones in yellow are the ones that are the 6 to 10 year. And again, these are using approximate cost just based on the information we have just at hand. So just continuing on this, to quickly touch on the actions taken out of since we completed this. So 2 of the higher priority structures were bridges 6 and bridges 14. So working with Michael, we did have condition surveys. That's it's a bit more of a invasive inspection where you actually go and you do some testing of the concrete, etc. So we did those condition surveys just last week. With the information that's going to come out of that, we will essentially be preparing a report where we look at what the recommended options are, whether it should be rehabilitated, whether they should be replaced, etc. Once we go through that assessment, we would essentially take it into detailed design at that point, where we would go through, do the design before it inevitably went to construction. In addition to that, we've been working on doing a similar job on bridge number 19. That one is being done in partnership with Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. So that one, we've completed that report, and it is now sort of going through the funding process. So that is in the works, and hopefully that design would be able to happen in 2023 and construction in 23 or 24, ideally. In addition to that,
sorry, I just want to interrupt really fast. I see Councillor Audrey has her hand raised for a potential question or comment.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, I'd like to know if you would state where these bridges and culverts are located. Pretty hard
I
to
can
see that little map.
Yeah, I can go back to the map. Are we talking about the two priority ones that I was mentioning there?
Yeah, as you go through your report here, see, it's hard to see where these are. So when you talk about bridges that you're rehabilitating or culverts or what the work you're doing, can you let us know what where they're located? So if it's on Cuba Road and that sort of stuff.
I can try to I can pull that up. And Michael, I'm not sure if you have those right offhand. I know I guess bridge 19 is not listed on here because it's already being taken care of. I don't have the street names in front of me, but I do. Bridge 6 just being just south of the main intersection there, and then Bridge 14 is a little bit more north.
Yeah, Bridge 6 is just west of or on third line, just west of Cheesewood. And Bridge 14 is on Onondaga Road, just north of 5th line. Bridge 19 would be on Cuga Road, south of 2nd line. So it's a boundary road bridge.
Yeah, so they are all quite spread out. And anytime we've been doing work, including this work last week that we had done, we're going through the process, making sure the public knows what lane closures are happening, etc. So we certainly take the impact to traffic seriously and try to avoid any impacts wherever possible. And sorry, just to finish the slide, there were a few other structures planned for work. So the replacement of culvert 2017 and 2 other bridge rehabilitations. So the main takeaway being, we are identifying the needs and then working quite promptly to address them. I think I see another hand up there as well.
I have a question too.
Okay, thanks. I'll go to first Councillor Gregg and then over to Councillor Carey. Greg, you have the floor.
Yeah. Hi, Curtis. These rehabs, are they just patching up the structure itself, or are they replacement?
So it depends. So when I say rehab, that would typically be sort of the concrete patching you're referring to. Replacements, obviously, it's a more expensive, it's a longer term benefit, but it also, like I said, comes with a higher price tag. Ultimately, every structure is going to be different, and that's what this process I'm talking about with Bridge 6 and 14, as well as the one that we wrapped up for the most part on Bridge 19. Essentially, what we do with that is we do a more detailed inspection of the structure, this condition survey. We look at all of the information that comes out of that, and we look at all of those options. So we say, okay, you could do this rehabilitation to it, you could widen the bridge, or you could replace it. Let's just say those are your 3 options. And we look at the cost and the long-term value of that, because it could be the difference of you spend $2 million today to replace it, but that's going to last you 75 years, or you spend $800,000 to rehabilitate it, but that bridge is going to need work again in 15 or 20 years. So there's an analysis and a process that we go through that basically weighs those over a 50-year time horizon, not just focusing on the money that gets spent today, but also how that sort of impacts the long-term value. And we make a decision and a recommendation based on that. So for example, just with this Bridge 19 one that we've gone through, we looked at those options, just rehabilitating it, widening it, and replacing it. And the preferred option that came out was a rehabilitation, just because it was in good enough condition that it didn't make sense to outright replace the bridge. That being said, we could do this inspection on a different structure, find different things about its condition, and that analysis could come up with a recommendation of fully replacing the bridge. So it does vary from every structure, but that's why we go through this process.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
Okay, sorry, I have Carey and Q next.
Yeah, Mike, the bridge on Tuscarora Road north of 5th line, what number is that, 10? What's the status on that inspection?
So that is bridge number 10. I'm not entirely sure if you want to go back to your slide, Curtis, on the 1 to 5. I think it might pop up there. Yep, there it is there. So it's 5th on the chart, or 5th row. So it is recommended for rehabilitation in the next 1 to 5 years. Priority number 5. Part of the great thing about this exercise is that we do get them to prioritize based on condition and how soon we should jump on these. So it's been great working with them so that we can figure out how to invest our money, because our capital is quite limited, and we have been working with the MTO and Indigenous Services Canada, so the provincial and federal governments on funding for these. So we definitely making a business case on trying to catch up and bridge this gap, this 1 to 5 year gap you see.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I have Sherry Lynn also has a question, comment.
Yes, are these all the bridges in total? Or is
No,
there more?
this is the list right here is just the ones that were identified as sort of needing work in the 10-year time horizon.
Okay. Okay, so then my next question for Mike is, do we have an overall report with all the bridges to like how much it would cost to replace them or even to widen them? Do we have an overall report of all the bridges? Thanks.
Yeah, so that's what this does for us. So it goes in depth on each bridge. So as Curtis had mentioned, we got our bridge and culverts. We got about approximately 40 of them. So we have a detailed report on each, and then a summary report looks at, you know, what we need to do within the next 1 to 10. Doesn't necessarily look into widening, just basically, you know, maintaining what's there. And as Curtis had said, if there's ever a need to rehabilitate or replace, they take us through those options and say, you know, if you want to widen it, if you want to add a sidewalk or a bike lane or something, then here's the cost and here's what we recommend.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess an overall, do we have one overall report that has all this information for all the bridges and
Yes, we do.
how we would like it in the future at our fingertips? Do we have that right on hand now?
Yes, yes, we do. So at the end of this exercise, what we do every 2 years, that gives us that report. So we have those we have an updated one every 2 years on bridge needs for all of our inventory of bridges and culverts.
Okay, can we get a copy of that to see what it looks like? Thank you.
For sure, not a problem. I can forward that on.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Sherry Lynn. Back over to you, Curtis.
Excellent. So I think I maybe just had one more slide after this, and then again, I can stick around as long as needed to answer any questions. So just sort of a next steps. So like I had said, the higher priority structures that we originally found, those have been addressed. And as you can tell, over the last several years, we've been working through that priority list to identify what needs to be done and kind of knocking them off, not just one at a time, which I think is important, but trying to leverage as much as possible, batching them together. So you see that there's a handful of structures identified as having some amount of work ideally in the next year or two. So there's 35 structures that are in that 60 to 80 range, which is when they're either in need of work or sort of coming up to that. So you're at the point where you can plan. So there's still plenty of work to go through, but the ones that are sort of the most critical have been addressed. Obviously, maintaining these biennial inspections is a big part of this, because every year you can sort of see the transition. You see the ones that maybe, an issue has come up with a structure that wasn't as critical before, but now it gets added to the list, and you can sort of see big picture, the overall health of the structures as you go. And like I said, just continue working through the rehab or replacements in a consistent manner. And then strategic planning wise, ultimately this all does just feed Mike and his team and being able to figure out the best way to go after addressing these structures. And that is essentially it. So I'm open to any other questions that you might have.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Curtis, as well as Mike, for bringing this forward and presenting this to council and community. I'm going to further look to open the floor up for further questions, comments. Audrey?
Yeah, thank you for the report. It's interesting. I would prefer to have it ahead of time though. And I would also prefer if you would consider putting into your chart form exactly where these bridges and culverts are located, so we don't have to go to a small little map, try and find where it is, and then transpose it back to our data. So that would be nice, and I do agree with Sheridan. I think we all need this report. So Mike, if you're going to send that to us, I appreciate it.
Chief, I have one.
Thanks, Audrey, for that. Carrie?
Yeah, Curtis, for the bridges that are in the 1 to 5 year range, what kind of rehab do you do on them between that time? Is it just cosmetic, or is there anything that you do as far as the rehab goes? Is it just a minimum amount of money to hold it over?
No, and kind of going back to what I was saying, there's no one size fits all fix for them, and it's definitely not cosmetic. These things, when we're identifying them for work, it's not because there's a pothole or something. It's because there's, without getting into the nitty gritty details, there's delamination or issues with the concrete that, do need to be patched. And it could be anywhere from, patching on the barrier walls to maybe they need to replace the barrier walls, or, some of them, it could be that there's issues with the concrete deck. So you got to remove the asphalt and patch those. So the one thing I should point out with the 1 to 5 year structures as well is it's not as though if one of those structures doesn't get touched until year 6, that there's any massive issue with that. It's just they are in that time frame when that's when it makes the most sense to do work to them. But again, whether you can get all 12 done in a 5-year period, it's not that it's a critical risk. It's just that as if one of those structures is getting fixed in year 2 from now, so say 2 years from now, it's going to cost less than if it's getting fixed 6 years from now, because the bridge will continue. Its condition is always changing. It's getting worse, so it will be more expensive 6 years from now than 2 years from now. So that it's just a piece of information that certainly helps plan and get the most value for money. But to your question on what the scope is, we do give an idea of what we think the scope should be. That is not ultimately the biggest takeaway from these OSIM inspections. It's more that there's additional inspections that have to go in once you say, okay, this structure, let's just say Bridge 6, for example, this structure needs work to be done to it. There is additional sort of more detailed investigations that get done that help crystallize what the scope of work on that structure should be, because you don't want to do too little and have to go back to that bridge 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but you don't want to do too much where you're replacing something that is still in good working condition. So there's not a one size fits all answer to that question, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for that, Carrie and Curtis. I see Phil has his hand raised.
Yes, I'm just inquiring. I know when these roads were built and bridges were built, they certainly weren't designed for the traffic that's being allowed to come into our territory today. I know down here on Third Line, we got the cement company down here that's just knocking the hell out of these roads and bridges. Does that alter? And also the trucks at night running through the reserve from the gypsum plant. Does that alter the speed or repair requirements on these bridges?
So I guess it's not something that gets factored in directly by us, but what you might see is if they are experiencing more wear and tear, then that would come out in that BCI rating. So if a bridge didn't have a lot of traffic on it at one point, maybe it stayed in quite good condition for many years. But if that same bridge then starts having a lot of heavy trucks crossing over it, then you start to see more deterioration of that structure. And then that's when the BCI starts to tick down. And that's when it starts to get into that point of work being done. Now, when it comes to if a bridge does come up as needing repair work, rehabilitation, replacement, whatever it may be, some of that information would come into play in the design, in the repair, to make sure that what the structure is being used for matches what it is actually what it's actually designed for. Because like the other thing I pointed out too is a lot of these bridges were built back in sort of the 1960s range, which is very common across the province. So what was standard then has obviously changed quite a bit, but that all gets addressed sort of during that design process.
Okay, and I guess this is addressed to the Six Nations Council, and I wish you would do something about that petition the Third Line residents put into you about controlling that traffic, that heavy traffic on the Third Line, because they're just destroying this Boston Bridge here. it'll be replaced before too long again. My comments, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Phil. And I think that goes for all the traffic, really, across the territory and the big trucks. Greg, and then over to Hazel.
Yes, I just wanted to know, like, you have just about, you're all encompassing, right, Curtis? You do the structural inspection, you have structural engineers and
Yep.
and all the actually required, you pass all the acquired, I would say, specifications to rehab bridges. But
Yep.
do you also work with companies that actually do the work? Or do you have a component that does the engineering, the inspection, the engineering recommendations, and then can you have another company actually come in and do some of the cosmetic work or the rehab work?
So we are not a contractor. I think that's what maybe you're asking. We do the inspection, like this front end stuff. So we would do everything up to, but not including the construction. So we do the inspection, we go through and basically use our engineering judgment to identify what work is needed. Then from there, when it gets identified, we say, okay, we're going to go ahead to rehabilitate it or replace it. We also do that design work. So bridge 18, bridge 5, bridge 9, bridge 15, bridge 7. We did the design for all of those structures. During construction, so we would put together all the specifications like you're talking about. We work with Michael with that. We give that information to Michael, the design, the tender document, and then Six Nations would then post that for contractors to bid on. During construction, it's a different entity, it's a different contract, like the contractor is doing the physical work. We have construction inspectors and contract administrators that basically oversee the work that's going on, making sure that the contractor is doing for Six Nations what they said they would, and handling payments to make sure that the contractor is not inflating things, that type of stuff. So we work during the construction phase in that capacity, but we're not a contractor in that we have people that are out there, chipping at the concrete and patching it, etc. That's left to a different company.
Just a follow up there, Chief. I guess a question, I guess it is for Mike. Mike, do we use any of our local construction companies to work on the bridges?
We do put it out to tender, so they are given an opportunity, but I haven't seen any locals bid on any of the upgrades we've done, the rehabilitations or the replacements at this point. But again, if they want to develop that capacity, I mean, the opportunity is there because they're put out publicly. Anything we do, and they are involved. They are advised that it's posted on publicly, so they just for whatever reason choose not to bid.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Greg. Sorry, if I could just ask Curtis, if you could just maybe stop your share screen.
Yep.
Have a full picture. I have Hazel in queue next, and then I see Helen, and I believe the other one is Melba, if I'm not mistaken. Hazel, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to know with regard to the lifespan of bridge to bridge, and the example being on Third Line, the bridge just down the hill from the JIP plant there. That bridge was fixed before, and like what Phil had said, with the huge traffic volume that goes over that bridge, has it ever been compared to another bridge that was fixed around the same time? And what is its condition? Because I think we need to have a little bit more authority on the usages of those bridges, because that cement company up to at the top of that bridge, is that a native owned? It doesn't sound like it. And I think that's areas that we should be comparing things to, and to sort of manage our roads to get a longer time that these bridges are fixed, and you don't have to go back and redo it so quickly. Also, that development of the capacity here at Six Nations, and I know we have A6N, and I know too that it would be very good for Six Nations to really look into that company, to have it expanded into various areas, mainly, like right now, I think they've done some of the water and all of that. But there's so many areas where it can be expanded, and that company can have its branches to do our own, so to speak. It's just a question. I don't know who's going to answer it or say anything, but I too think that our roads need attention so badly, and our bridges, if they're falling down, and like the bridge at near the jet plant down there, and that cement company that's using that bridge all the time. So what should we be looking at to manage our reserve better, so we don't have to spend so much money fixing everything? Thank you.
So I don't know if I can answer all of those questions, but I guess you were talking about sort of the lifespan of a typical bridge, which that I can answer. One built around now, and even there's older structures probably have a shorter lifespan just because the quality of materials and construction, et cetera, has improved. If you were to build a bridge now, you would expect it to last for approximately 75 years. That's sort of the lifespan of a structure. That is not to say necessarily that you can build it and not touch it for 75 years. That 75 years assumes that there's regular maintenance and rehabilitation done to it. A typical life might be you build it, 30 years after that, approximately 25 or 30 years, it undergoes a rehabilitation. Then another, 25 years after that, another rehabilitation. And then the next time it comes up as needing work, you're about 75 years. And that's where maybe it's in good enough condition that it will outlast that 75 years, or maybe the structure is outdated. You're looking to widen the road, et cetera, and you then start looking at potential replacement. So I guess the short answer is a structure would be roughly 75 years until sort of it's outlived its service life. In terms of the use of the structure, I don't think that's something I can necessarily speak to.
Okay, thanks, Curtis. And I think just to further add, I know we also, had the presentation, or rather the document, looking to just that, what you're speaking of, Hazel, ASICs and expanding their services, or rather business and the branches of the type of work that they're going to further get into. So that's also in play. In terms of the authority of the bridges itself, I mean, I think we can't just focus in on one bridge. We need to look at all bridges in all areas and what all traffic brings into this territory. And not just really rely on the one area. I mean, I know the one area is of concern right now, brought to you by members within that area, third line residents, which I know we have yet to deal with. However, I think if we're going to be talking about the bigger picture, then let's look at all the bridges and talk about what that authoritative looks like. Helen, and then over to Melba.
Yeah, I can appreciate the citizens on third line being worried about the traffic, but our well, we all know Chiefswood Road, what that's like. I live here. I mean, it takes me 15 minutes to get out of my laneway. Nothing but trucks and cars. And I don't know if we've ever done a traffic count before. And I think sometimes we need to do that. 6 line is getting really bad. And our roads and our bridges, as far as I can understand from years ago, weren't built for this kind of traffic. They were built for us, our little community, to go back and forth. It wasn't built, they weren't built for all this kinds of traffic. And that really is having an impact in our community on, I think, most of the roads. But 6 line is really getting bad for traffic, and the road itself is terrible. So I really think there's a major concern for all of the roads. And I don't, like I said, I would love to see a traffic thing on Chiefswood just to see. I estimate 10,000 cars probably in a half hour or because it's constantly, and then in the middle of the night, we have all those big transport trucks going through here. Probably on their way to Simcoe or somewhere. So we need to really look at traffic, I think, because our chip and tar roads, you know, we don't have that many paved roads. Most of our roads are chip and tar, I think, if Mike, if I'm not wrong, Mike. So they weren't made for this. And it's business that's bringing everybody here, but we can't stop business. And that's what's bringing the traffic for the most part. Like I said, Chiefswood Road, during the night, it's mostly big trucks using it as a cut through to wherever they're going. So we need to really look at traffic and try and figure out how we can deal with all of the traffic coming through here. There's, you know, several people have suggested doing toll booths. I'm thinking sometimes when I sit outside waiting to get out of my laneway, I think to myself, that's not a bad idea. But it's just something we need to look at, I think, is the overall traffic, big trucks, and all that kinds of stuff.
Okay, thanks, Helen, for your comments. Not sure, Curtis, if you have any comments just to add, or Michael, on that piece, because I know at the end of the day, the other piece, I think all that ties together with this is the, you know, community standards in looking at how you know, we're going to enforce these types of things. I think is another piece that we need to look at. I mean, there's so many moving items to this, you know, this one topic, but not sure if Michael or Curtis, if you have anything further to add in relation to the traffic control comments made by Helen.
I mean, I don't, I see, Michael, you come off mute there. I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, so just to Alan's point there, we did undertake a roads needs study in 2022 here. And I can tell you the exact traffic counts that we're taking of that area. So there's 8,000 to 10,000 vehicles per day coming down that section of Chiefswood Road. Those are things we do as well, you know, to plan. And not to get lost, I know there's a lot of needs, but we've progressed quite well as was identified there, and we're continuing to progress not only on our bridges but our road surfaces and our network. So using a lot of these different tools and these different studies and really actionizing them into good solid plans, and you're going to see some acceleration on our road resurfacing, and you're going to see a lot of work. This is the community, you know, I apologize. I know that it's disruptive and inconvenient, but when you do see that work, know that it is well thought out and planned, and in the best interest of our future generations. You know.
Appreciate that, Mike. Thanks. Just to follow up back to Helen, and then I'll continue to go down the speakers list. Helen.
Yeah, I remember years ago when they brought in the federal gas tax and let people designate it for people to fix roads. That's what Bradford uses for most of all their roads. Fixing their roads is the federal gas tax. Prior, there used to be a First Nations federal gas tax that was being looked after by the AFN, but they didn't do their job properly. And finally, the government took the tax away from the AFN and put it into an overall pot. I think they're calling it the infrastructure fund, I'm not sure, and told us we had to apply. But we need to fight that, because we have at least, I think the last time I counted, we had 16, 17 gas stations on the reserve. That's more than Brantford, I think. And Brantford gets all this money because it's a medium-sized city. They go by the size of the city as to how much federal gas tax you get. I'm assuming it's how much gas stations you have. I don't know. We're topping Brantford for gas stations. We would be considered a large community if we weren't a reserve. And we should be getting our fair share of that money because we are so large. And if you stop, you know, if we ever took time to look to say how much money we paid in tax on all this gas, because the federal gas tax, a hidden tax. You don't see that when you buy your gas, but it's there. if we could ever count how much money we donate to that federal gas tax with over 16, 17 gas stations, we should be considered a large city. And that's what we should be fighting for. And we should be getting that share of the money as opposed to getting it for a little community. We're getting paid. We're in the same category as Caledonia or Hagersville. Caledonia's got what, 2 gas stations? How many Hagersville have? I think they only got 1, or I'm not sure. So we're getting really ripped off with this federal gas tax. And I remember when I was working on this back in the day and trying to get the AFN to do what they were supposed to do with it, but they never did anything with it. So finally the government just took it away from them and turned it into an overall fund and told us we had to apply just like everybody else. But I know a lot of it's based on the size of a city as to how much money you can get. We're not a city, but we certainly have the gas stations to support considered being a large city. So that's something I think we need to look at and get more money to fix our roads, because that's what they use to fix all their roads is the federal gas tax, or infrastructure fund, I think it's called now. But anyway, that's something I think council needs to look at, getting back to looking at that and start fighting for our right for this money. We contribute billions of federal taxes to the federal government with all our gas stations. So that's just something I want us to start looking at, or I think we should anyway.
Thank you, Helen. I think you've listed another political advocacy point outside of this. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. I think that might be from Melba. Melba, you're next in queue anyway, so you have the floor.
Yes. Has there been discussions and plans concerning sidewalks on all the bridges for safety concerns of our high population, especially for children walking who are playful, carefree a lot of the time? Thanks.
Thanks, Melba. Mike?
I know that when we are replacing bridges now, we are incorporating sidewalks at least one side of the bridge, just for future planning, because we know, our community is growing exponentially. So we're just really, and we don't necessarily have control over development. So we're doing our best to ensure that all areas are accommodated, whether it's, the heart of Ashwegan or upper end or down below, whatever it may be, but we're making sure that there's when we do replace bridges, and we always have that conversation, and when we do rehabilitate them, about looking at those options to add a sidewalk in. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Mike. Audrey?
Thanks, Mark. I'd like to say that I agree with my colleagues. I think we continue on with what we're doing here. Mike, you're doing a good job on finding all the things that are troubling with our bridges and our culverts, etc. But I also would like to suggest that council bring back that petition on number at highway, third line. I think the community members in that area have a legitimate concern, and that is all the dust, the traffic, the noise. I think we have to put this on council agenda, and we have to have full discussion on it. And maybe even invite the community members in that area in. We have to do our due diligence on it. For once and for all, who owns that company? Maybe a suggestion might be is that they redivert the traffic back out to Highway 6 so that it saves the wear and tear on Six Nations roads, which one of my colleagues mentioned that they're chip and tar and they're not meant for all these heavy trucks. So we got to think about that for the whole reserve, and it's got to be a long-term plan.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. And we will look to that suggestion as you've raised to bring that back to another meeting, and we can further discuss that matter. Nathan?
Yeah, thanks, Chief. And I just wanted to echo everyone's comments. Mike, great job on getting us the work, the plans together, as well as the data, so that we can make these informed decisions. To be honest, I'm not really interested in furthering that administrative work. I don't need to see it. But what I do need to see again is the political issues that we've highlighted before. We got to stop getting bogged down on the administrative side and really focus in on those political issues. And I'm really glad Helen highlighted for us what they were. You know, just going back to Helen's comments, I think the two political issues that we have to deal with are, you know, the tax issue and ensuring that at the end of the day, we're getting our fair share. Because Helen's right, how much money from all of our gas stations, and they do collect tax. Let's not kid ourselves. They do collect tax. We are tax collectors from a gas perspective. How many of that goes into that, you know, infrastructure fund that Canada funds? You know, that's our money in terms of preparing for our roles. So we got a lot of work to do in preparing that political work. And then to the further point around, you know, the roads, I raised this right off. I think it was like the third council meeting I ever went to. I raised this, and we really, you know, talked about that need to exercise our jurisdiction, because it's a jurisdiction issue, right, on our roads, and who's allowed on those roads. So I think we have a lot of work to do there, and I think it's right. I think all of this is linked to back to our community standards. And I'll be honest, like, are we just going to keep sitting on the pot? Are we going to poop? Are we going to go? Like, what are we going to do on these community standards? That's the issue that we have to look at in terms of those political aspects of things. So really appreciate the report that was being done. But I think if we want to move on these political issues, we're going to have to make a decision. You know, community standards, are we going to go? Then let's go. Let's get it done. Because the road issue and who's allowed on the road from a jurisdictional standpoint is going to sit there. You know, we can bring in those that are on third line, but the issue is still going to sit there unless we move on these political issues. So from my standpoint, that's where I'm interested in looking at doing some further work. And I think given, you know, where we're at and some of the corporate member we have, I think this would be a good spot and a jumping spot to work on those things. Yeah.
Thanks, Nate. Totally agree with your comments. I think they're right in line with in terms of the political advocacy piece, and I'm glad Helen mentioned as well the federal gas tax or the infrastructure fund now as it's referenced to. But I think, you know, to further to add, and not only to say, for example, the community standards, but I think the other important piece for this is own source revenue. And what does that look like for political work? I know a lot of the times, and I too want to say now and thank you, Mike, to yourself and your team, because I know a lot of the times our roads people don't get the, you know, I guess don't get the necessarily the words that of you know, the appreciation that they deserve, because there's a lot of work that goes into, regardless of, yes, the state of our roads at times are not in the best shape. But I think regardless of which, we still have a lot of, you know, of our own members who are doing their best to maintain those roads as best as we can with the dollars that we have allocated specifically for this. So I think just to, you know, to sum up, you know, the conversation, I agree in terms of the political pieces. I know, and thanks, Mike. I see you've already sent out that report to full council. And so, and again, the other report, the presentation was in fact in your Dropbox as well for your perusal prior to this meeting. But I think the other piece to this, again, is highlighting those political pieces. So, you know, I do like where Helen's going in terms of, you know, the federal gas tax, you know, looking to some political work there, as well as, again, our own internal work with the community standards. I think that's a huge portion that's going to tie into a lot of the issues here in the community. You know, it's once and for all, what do those standards look like? I think that's the type of conversations that we need to start to engage more with our community. And the other piece, again, I'm going to mention again, which I've already did, is the own source revenue. We need to continue to look at how and ways to make our own money with less strings attached so that we can be able to allocate whatever we see fit to do our roads, to do our bridges, to do all this. Because as we speak right now, it's all relying on government funding. which is why we have to prioritize, obviously, all these bridges and culverts and roads and so forth. But I think, again, if we can look to access our own funds to do this work in a timely manner, that's, I think, the direction that we are looking to head towards. I just wanted to check in. I see Melba still has her hand raised. Just want to make sure, Melba, yeah, you didn't have another further question or comment? Oh, no. Okay, so is there any further final questions or comments? Again, do appreciate the presentation this morning, Curtis and Michael, and look forward again to our next steps on how we can again continue to best maintain as best as we can. I will look at then if seeing or hearing no further questions or comments, I will look for a motion, mover and seconder, to accept the bridges and culvert inspection summary presentation as information. Is there a mover to that effect? Moved by Audrey, seconder. Second by Helen. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Well, thank you again, Yawa, Curtis, for joining us this morning, and as well, Mike, for walking us through this presentation this morning. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Okay, Councilman, can you continue moving along the agenda here? The next item on our agenda is the adoption of the political liaison minutes of November 14th.
I'll move, Sherlyn.
Moved by Sherry Lynn, seconded by Helen. Further questions, comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Okay, we have recommendations from our CAP team. You'll see recommendation 6.1 is where we're at. I'll look to, I believe, who's on our line here. Lonnie, I'll look to Lonnie. Recommendation 6.1 to maybe just walk us through.
Okay, Mark, I don't have my agenda with me, so what is that involving?
This is Bell.
Yes, okay, so we've been, CAP team has been meeting with Bell. They have a number of, well, they still have their infrastructure on the territory. The agreement has long expired for them to be here, and they want to begin a process of negotiating a new agreement to cover what their assets that are on a reserve. So they don't have many assets. It's mainly the well, they do have some towers, I think. No, I don't believe they have any towers. I'm sorry to say that, but they do have their infrastructure with their lines for landlines, and they do have some transformer stations. We're not looking at them to become involved in the internet at this point, because we already, to my understanding, that has already been covered through First Nations internet services. So, and plus we also have broadband services that a lot of people have. So, but they just need something to allow them to be here. And so we're prepared to talk to them, come to some final agreement, and have some income from what the structures they do have here on the reserve. So this is just an ask of council for this memorandum to be signed so we can go ahead and get something finalized with them and bring it back to council.
Okay, thanks, Lonnie. Just a quick question: does this encompass individual properties as well? I know that they do have some assets within individual community members' properties. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, they do have that. Yes.
So would that be encompassing of that as well, and as part of these discussions, negotiations?
It would be, because it has to cover the whole territory, which council has jurisdiction over. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And to be honest, I've always had an issue because I don't think we've been getting enough from Bell, given their size and record and so forth as a company. So this is, again, I do agree. So this is just really to start those conversations, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks for that, Lonnie. I see Greg has his hand raised.
Hi, Lonnie, it's Greg here. Are they looking to pay us rent? Is that how it's gonna work?
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
and that, do we get a chance to look at the income that they've made off the residents here on the res, or is that kind of a privileged information?
Well, we can ask for it as part of the talks with them. We say, look, council's concerned, they want to know. You know, since this agreement expired in what, 1995, I think they once had an agreement for, or 1999, sorry. You know, they have still had their infrastructure here, and they have been, you know, providing services to the community through that, but there has been no, to my knowledge, payment for the infrastructure they use or have on reserve. So we can ask them of that. We want to know how much you've actually made from the services that have been here since the last agreement expired, and that would be part of the negotiation strategy, and we'll make note of that.
Well, just to follow up, Chief.
Sure.
Because Bell off the res, they rent out their Bell lines to other carriers. Do they do that here on the res?
I don't believe so. No.
Oh, okay. Thank
I
you.
think it's just restricted to just straight use by them.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Greg, for your comments and questions. Are there any further comments or questions in relation to the resolution? I think it's a long time coming. 1999 was quite a while ago.
Yeah, I know. When I first started on this job in 2007, negotiations were going on then, and somehow I don't know what that was, council changeover or the political activities that were occurring, but it never was finalized, and it sits there with no agreement. At least when I started this job in 2007, to you know, to cover what their assets are on their reserve, and so we need to really look at that. When we need to look at, yes, it's income that they owe us for their services on the reserve.
Agreed. Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Lonnie. Is there any further questions or comments? And if not, I am going to call for a mover and second. Oh, I see Carrie.
I'll move that, Chief.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. It's moved by Carrie. Is there a seconder? Second by Greg. Again, final or further comments, questions? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Motion to waive second reading.
I'll move that.
Moved by Carrie, seconder. Seconded by Greg. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Okay, thanks, Lonnie. The next one, 6.2, just in relation to the monthly report.
Yes, either Taylor or Peter Graham could speak to that.
Sure. Let's look to Taylor. Again, this has been privy within your Dropbox, Council. So if there's any further questions or comments out of that report, but just before then, I'll go to Taylor to any highlights.
So yeah, it's just a standard monthly report from last political liaison to the deadline to submit it. There's now a column that says potential political advocacy. So we have like highlighted where we've been talking about a commendation or an MOU or something of that nature, term sheet draft. So and then it's also highlighted in yellow. So there's a couple in works and a couple are also future further briefing notes underneath. And yeah, so just from after October, the last October meeting until last Tuesday, all the meetings we had.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that, Taylor. And I'm glad to see that extra column that helps again, really maneuver through the political advocacy pieces on this. I know we're trying to, again, in the office, look to, highlight all of these so that council can continue to track these, not just on the CAP side, but just in general across the board when we talk any political advocacy and where our plans are. And what the status of each is. So we're working on that document internally as well for council to continue to look at that tracking. So do appreciate that. Further questions, comments in relation to the report? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands or anyone going off of mute, so I will then look to a mover and seconder to accept the October and November 2022 consultation and accommodation process team activity report as information.
Move, Chief.
Thank you for that, Nathan. It's moved by Nathan. Is there a seconder? Seconder to the motion, second by Greg. Further questions, comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you for that, Taylor and Lonnie. And sorry, just really quickly, Greg, if I can just ask to have your hand down. It looks like you have a question there. Unless you do have a question or comment. Okay, no. All right, thanks for that, Greg. Looking to then now 6.3 on our agendas, which is the consultation agreement with Enbridge. Looking for an engagement agreement. I'll look to Lonnie to give us a background on this 6.3.
Yeah. So Enbridge, we haven't been talking to them for some while. There was a period of time when we were discussing matters with them, particularly in regards to line 10, which is just outside the territory that runs parallel to the territory, but eventually does cross the Grand River further up, and then continues on to the United States. Previously, the issue revolved around line 9, replacement around line 9, and the Chippewas of the Thames had because it also runs through their territory, they had started a court action saying they weren't properly consulted and accommodated, and commenced with it on that basis. And this council back in the day was in support of that. Didn't want to talk to Enbridge until that court case was resolved. It worked its way through all levels of court to the Supreme Court of Canada, and it's fair to say that the Chippewas of the Thames lost. And so that doesn't mean that there wasn't a duty to consult and accommodate, because that still is there. And eventually, as I understand it, they did enter some sort of a benefits agreement with Enbridge, and Enbridge still wants to come to some arrangement with Six Nations, because their lines, line 9, line 10, line 11, and so forth, are going through Six Nations territory, and they're wanting to come to some sort of arrangement with Six Nations about talking about the future of those lines. They also and they want to do this by entering into a memorandum of understanding for those discussions to occur. You know, memorandums of understanding, as we all know, are not really legally binding agreements. It's just an agreement that we're going to talk about specific issues and try to reach some agreement. So what we're looking for here, and I know council, we had reported this to council back in the earlier part of this year, that we were wanted to meet with them. We got council's approval to do that. And so the result of that is this memorandum of understanding that we want to enter into with council. And one of the things that we raised that we want to talk about is, and council had expressed their concern to us, is they want to know whether the delivery charges for gas can be removed for residents of the territory. And Enbridge says they're willing to talk about that. So that's one of the things that we will engage them on if this MOU is signed by council, for us to engage them on that topic. So so that's what it's just an agreement to continue discussions in a formal matter. As I said, it was before council earlier on, I think February of this year, and we got approval to go ahead and see what we can arrive at with Enbridge. And this is the result so far that we're asking for council approval for the chief, again, to sign be permitted to sign the MOU with Enbridge. Taylor, did you want to add anything further to that?
No, I think that was pretty thorough, Lonnie.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Lonnie. And again, just to clarify, it's just an engagement agreement, correct?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I think that's where, regardless of which, that's where these types of discussions where we can, again, help to, like, say, for example, you've listed one of the delivery charges on the gas bills for our members. I mean, that's where these agreements start the discussion so that we can actually push on the political side to, again, hopefully see, obviously a good outcome.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that as well. Are there any further questions or comments from council in relation to 6.3 on the engagement agreement? I see Audrey has her hand raised, and then over to Helen.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that our legal team will be involved in all of this work. You know,
Yes, any kind of agreement that we do arrive at has to be run through the lawyers. That's definitely a part of the whole process.
Yeah, it's vetted through. Thanks for that, Audrey. Helen?
Yeah, Lonnie, you can add on your list too, not to raise our gas rates. They've applied to raise the gas rates.
Okay. Okay.
And, let them know we're a struggling little gas company trying to service our community, and we can't afford to raise our rates.
Okay. Okay. We will make note of that.
Agreed. Thanks for that, Helen. Sherry Lynn?
Yeah, I totally agree that to have some talks regarding these kind of things, because they're outrageous that they have on our bills. So I'm in agreement for that. The other part that I'm not too sure about is the 30,000. That's pretty cheap for 5 years. If we have line 9 and 10 and 11, you know what I mean? But if they agree to take some of that other stuff off, plus, more than that, they make enough money.
Yeah. Well, there is
30,000 a year for 5 years. To me, that's unacceptable.
Yeah. Well, I think there is a provision in there. Taylor, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but so we need more. If that isn't adequate for our CFA funding, then we can request more. That's pretty much what we always put in those agreements, that if there is a requirement for more, then we can go back and ask that be done. And usually there shouldn't be any problem with that.
Follow up, Chief? Just says, yeah, and I'm glad to hear that, but I would be reaching for the stars and going low. Go high and then go low.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
I think that's good points raised as well, Sherry Lynn. Greg, and then over to Audrey.
Yes, I agree with Sherry Lynn. It did seem a little bit low, and then it's kind of stretched over 5 years. Lonnie, is there any a timeline you can put on that, or even increase it every year until an agreement is made, just for incentive? Because it looks like if they can go every 5 years and just keep delaying.
Yeah. What I think I'll really make sure of is that there is a provision in there that if this money proves to be inadequate at any time, that we come back and we have the ability and we will ask for an increase, and that they will be obligated to consider that. And if it's reasonable, which it would be, then we should be able to get that without any problem, because they really do want an agreement with us. And I think we're in a driver's seat on our ask. We hadn't really thought of that in putting together this memorandum, but that provision can be put in there, and I'll make sure it is.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks for that, Greg and Lonnie. Audrey.
there you go, Lonnie. Just wanted to know if it's possible to include some kind of a statement in there where we can help protect our seniors and have them have some reduced rates and so it doesn't cause them any undue hardship, as well as people with physical and or general disabilities. as well as people who have low income who can't hardly afford
That's a gas.
the gas bills and the delivery charges. They're so astronomical.
Mhm.
You know,
I think just to your point, Audrey, that's we want, obviously, we always look to to those groups, or rather to the people, our seniors, all those for as priority. But I think we want the whole territory, we want all of our members to have, again, decreased rates and no delivery charges. So I think that's going to be our like to Sherry Lynn's point, is reaching for the stars first and foremost, and making sure all of our members are included.
Okay. Yeah.
follow up.
I'll make a note of that, definitely, and we're gonna ask that. And on any kind of final agreement that we can get with them, sure.
Agreed. Thanks. Thanks for that, Lonnie. Follow up.
Audrey for
Audrey?
follow up. So we all get X number off. I'm asking for additional for people who are vulnerable.
Yeah.
Handicapped,
that. Yeah.
people who don't
Thanks.
have an income who can even afford that.
Thanks for that
That's what I'm looking at. It's more than
I appreciate that. Thanks for
everybody.
that
It's people who are
clarification.
really struggling. Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
Okay, thanks for that, Audrey. Sherry Lynn.
Sorry, that was just a hand up. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Oh, sorry, Audrey, your hand is still up as well. Okay, is there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, then I will look to mover and seconder on recommendation 6.3 to authorize myself to sign the engagement agreement.
And Chief, I will, before you sign it, we will make sure that that escalator clause is put in there in case we do need greater amounts of consultation dollars.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for that. And sorry, I just want to go really quickly go to the chat. It's from a comment from Rod Whitlow in relation to the extent that Enbridge took over Union Gas. If we could include consideration of support to help with the decommissioning of abandoned natural gas wells. Union Gas provided technical support before. So maybe Alani, can you also add that as well?
Sure, sure.
Great, thanks for that, Rod. Okay, is there a mover and seconder?
I'll move. It's Sherry Lynn with a question.
Okay, sure, go ahead. I'll just get a seconder first. Sherry Lynn, it's moved by Sherry Lynn, seconder.
I'll second, Nathan.
Second by Nathan. Back to question, Sherry Lynn.
Is there a time frame? I'd like a time frame. Thanks.
Sure, Lonnie, do we know?
We want to set up a meeting with I forget his name. I always forget his name. He's an Indigenous person now who works for Enbridge.
Kevin Berube?
Is
that who you're
yeah,
thinking
Kevin
of, Lonnie?
Berube. Kevin Berube. That's right. He's from Treaty 9 area, I think. Yeah, we will set up a meeting with him as soon as possible and get these discussions underway and try to have something before council for consideration in the early part of 2024.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you for that, Lonnie.
2023.
In the early part
Sorry,
of
2023.
2023. Yeah, it's already a year ahead.
I'm taking it myself.
Thanks, Sherilyn. Further questions, comments, and if not, looking for a mover and seconder.
I moved and Ethan did.
My apologies. It's Monday morning. I'll go to the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Motion to waive second reading.
I'll move.
Moved by Sherry Lynn, seconder. Seconder on second reading.
Second.
Second by Nathan. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Okay, thanks for that part, Lonnie and Taylor. Recommendation 6.4, Canadian National Railway. I'll look to you, Lonnie, for some further background.
Okay, so this was back, we brought back a memorandum for council's consideration, possible approval back in 2020 because of the events that were occurring with respect to Caledonia and Caledonia and Mackenzie Meadows, that the matter of having approval for that was delayed or until to be brought back at a later time. So So we've been wanting to do that recently, saying, look, we have an agreement where Six Nations can obtain substantial benefits, including the return or the obtaining of land with CNR. So it's being brought back to council as it originally was constituted 2 years ago for consideration of being approved now. So I know Taylor and Phil's on too. I know Phil was concerned about the reforestation and getting land where that reforestation can occur, and CNR was agreeable to that. This all stems really from the Milton Hub that we began discussions on a few years back now when Doug Devlin was there, and as part of the consideration for the Milton Hub, CNR agreed to provide benefits to Six Nations. And so these are the things that are being brought back to council for approval from that original Milton Hub idea. So I hope I summarized it right, Taylor or Phil.
Well, if I could, yeah, it's the summary. It's just to begin these discussions because certain commitments were made by CN through the when we're going through the community engagement process down there in Milton, and setting aside a tract of land and reforestation to counteract the pollution that's going to be created in that area. And there's no point in putting it in Toronto because it'll be a matter of 20 years the way the present government is. It would, all of our efforts for the environment would be just plowed over and paved over. So we're trying to jointly set up a substantial tract of land, actually, that would be whether it be for the wildlife and forestry and eventually under the control of Six Nations. So it's just the beginning of those discussions. We had those commitments made, but as Lonnie pointed out, they're put on hold, and now we have new players in the game, so we better get back to those discussions. I'm hoping we can. If we wait much longer, the Milton Hub will be built on us, and we'll be sitting there in the grass waiting for somebody to talk to again. So encourage us to, if council can support this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Phil. Open up now for questions, comments. I'll start with Greg and then over to Sherry Lynn.
Yeah, hi, Phil. Yeah, that was my main question was like how much land, even if there was approximation and basically where it was all situated. But I had another question about a clause in the memorandum, the number 11, clause number 11. It was said Six Nation agrees that it will not do anything to prevent the safe and lawful maintenance and operation of the project. So that kind of eliminates any type of protest or any kind of a blockage, right? Is that the intent of that number 11?
Basically, is we use our best efforts.
Okay, so if something happens outside our control, and that clause, will that kind of nix the deal?
I think that's where the point of discussion is. There's only so much we can do. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Councillor. You know, there's always going to be what we've experienced in the community, the splits and the countering anything that somebody does. So I think we just may make our best efforts as we have in the past.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Phil. Sherry Lynn.
Yes, and I think this is good topic to discuss, but I think also too, the part of it is what Ford's doing with this green belt.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I think we really need to grab a handle on where Six Nations at and where's our voice at this. So again, if this is something we're doing there, we need to do it all the way around. And especially Ford's really pushing for it, you know, and Six Nations needs to stand up because he's just gonna, like Phil said, what is gonna happen to Milton? That's the same as gonna happen in this green belt.
Yeah.
So I would really strongly, hopefully, as soon as possible, that this council can really start advocating or have a statement or something regarding the green belt that Ford is really pushing for. Thank you.
That's really really great point politically as well. Thanks for that, Sherilyn. And it's obviously duly noted. Further questions, comments? Okay, I'm not seeing.
I just have a comment.
Sure, go ahead, Helen, and then over to Phil.
Yeah, I agree with Sherry Lynn. We got to really get on this bill 21, because it's not only the green belt, it's the whole Haldeman tract.
Yes.
That he's opening up for development. And they're overriding the Conservation Authority's authority. So we really need to get on that, come up with some kind of a strategy of some sort.
Okay, sorry, just to confirm, I think is it Bill 23 you're referring to, right, Helen? Yeah.
Yes, that is the bill. Yes.
Yeah, Bill 23, and I know that was the discussion with Chiefs of Ontario as well. Obviously, one of the other piece to that too is his goal obviously is to build, and thanks for that, Christopher, is to build more homes quicker. And that's the other thing, right? Is we don't even have homes for our own members. On the flip side of this, not only to the other issues and environmental concerns and so forth. So I do agree. Now we can, Christopher, if we can note that on the political side to start to draft or look at our strategic plan in terms of our position. So thanks for that. I do agree, Phil.
Yes, I just so grateful to hear from Sherry Lynn and Helen on those comments, because it would certainly give some backbone to what Lonnie and the CAP team have to face. And when we're facing developers, and where is Ontario in all of this? So yes, if we could get some political backing on this, it would certainly help in all the discussion the CAP team has to face. Thank you.
Agreed. Thanks for that, Phil. Okay, are there any further questions or comments in relation to 6.4? Okay, seeing or hearing none, then I will call for a mover and seconder. Moved by Helen, seconded by Audrey. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. A motion to waive second reading. Moved by Helen, seconded by Audrey. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. So, and thanks, Christopher. Christopher will be sending out a briefing note on Bill 23 and the building homes policies soon. So all overall, thanks for that, Phil, as well. Okay, I'm going to continue moving on the agenda here. Looking to recommendation 6.5. This is in relation with Ontario Place proponents.
Yes, all right. I could, Chief. We have been meeting with Ontario Place. They're redeveloping that place. It's been around since I remember when it was first built back in the early 1970s, and over the years it's become sort of in disuse, or had improvements have been made to it, and so now there's a plan by Ontario to redevelop it and make it more user attractive and user friendly, and of course they have to consult with in doing so they have to consult with Indigenous First Nations who have an interest in the Toronto area, and of course Six Nations does. So we have been talking with them now, it's at least a year, about some of the things that we would like to see done with Ontario Place, and they want to continue talking with us, and we have a need for consultation dollars, and to do that, so that's what this asking council to approve entering into agreement, an MOU with them, and then there's also a provision for dollars to be provided for us to adequately consult with them. And so that's what's the gist of what we're asking council for approval to sign the MOU, and then to approve for the chief also to sign the funding agreement. They call it TAP, I think, whatever it's, or TPA, transfer payment agreement. And so anything I missed, Taylor, on that?
I'm just gonna say, so the Ontario is in charge of the public part of Ontario Place Redeveloping. They also have, was 3, but currently 2 private developers that are consulting with us separately. So they aren't part of this MOU, they're on their own. But they were picked by Ontario in their tender. So this one is just with the ministry, and then they also bring in Infrastructure Ontario.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that background there, Lonnie and Taylor. I'm going to open the floor up now for further questions, comments. I'll first begin with Audrey, Nathan, over to Hazel, and then Greg. Audrey, you have the floor.
My comment is one that the counselors here have been making for a number of years now. And that is, I think we have to work closer with CAP. Your recommendations and what you would like need to be brought to council, so council can approve or add more and have a full discussion on it, so that we're a team going through all of this and working together. So that's one of the things I would like to suggest we continue to do, and do a better job on. So we know what each is doing, as well as you have a representation on CAP from council, chief and council. You know.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Audrey. And I know, obviously, things have, we've been getting better, but I think we can continue to do better. To your point, Audrey, and I know Christopher has been that rep for some time as well, to kind of help bridge as well at the CAP team itself, and to further support the CAP team in their activities. So I know, again, do agree, we can always get better, and I think that's something that we're always going to continue to strive for. Nathan, over to Hazel.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chief. So this one I'm pretty supportive of, only from the standpoint of the summaries have been coming in, and this has evolved quite a bit over the last year. So there's been a number of attempts at this particular engagement, and I know they have, had various different ideas. But I think my only comment at this point is situating ourselves. I understand, Lonnie, we're taking the resources, and I think that's a good idea. But I think we really have to, get our elbows up on this issue, and situate ourselves properly, so that, these other interests who, from what I understand, signed away their rights to this particular area, are put in the proper spot as the kind of the host community, because I think the word host communities are being used improperly by Ontario. And I think that's where we have to situate ourselves. At the end of the day, there are rights, and there are rights that are being eroded. And I think that's where we need to focus majority of our efforts on. In reviewing the MOU, I think the pieces are there. Can certainly tell legal has looked at it. Yeah, I think we're situated right. But my only comment, Chief and Lonnie, is just to that effect of like, what is a host community? I don't think, I think there is some confusion across the board. And I think we have to solidify ourselves as, just not worry about, who's hosting and who we're standing beside while we give a land acknowledgement. I don't think that's important. What is important is the fact that our rights are being eroded. And those rights, I think we have to protect. So how best do we do that without this other, confusion and distraction that's going on?
Yeah, I hear you. And we, I've had a problem with what's going on in Toronto, because we've been looked at as having a secondary interest in it. and which is not true. We have a primary interest in everything that occurs in Toronto, based on, just the Nanfan Treaty and the fact that, we once had settlements there, particularly Seneca settlements. So we're not, we're definitely going to push for that. I mean, it's hard, Ontario has a strategy that they're going to try to demolish or denigrate Six Nations interests in around a great area of the Golden Horseshoe. And so, we're continually fighting that and saying, no, that is not true. There's some point in time in the legal sense, we're going to have to stand up and prove that. And I know it's coming to that someday. So no, we never ever agree to that, and we will never agree to that we have a secondary interest in the Toronto or the greater Golden Horseshoe area, just based on our Nanfan Treaty.
Agreed. And thanks for that, bringing that forward as well, Nathan, and your response, Lonnie. I think it's important on those pieces. Greg, you have the floor next.
Yeah. I just had a couple questions directly to the payment agreement. 125,000 over 2 years, and now the cost of this project must be in the millions. Is it because the 125, is that similar to what other groups have accepted? Is that sort of how they work? And the other question I had was, in the agreement itself, it says we have to answer to the Government of Ontario, the Sector Accountability Act, the Salary Disclosure Act, Auditor General Act. Like, what are they? It's almost as if they're treating us like children and we can't balance a checkbook. That's sort of what I got out of that. But I just wanted your thoughts on that, on what do you think the budget is, if you think that 125,000 is fair, and being actually restricted to all of these government acts. Thanks.
Yeah, Greg, I think it's fair at this point. I mean, we've been doing a lot of activities where we haven't got any contribution from them at all, because I know I didn't go with the group when they went this past summer to visit Ontario Place and meet with the representatives there, but we did that out on our own coin. And so that's because we're interested in what's being done there, and we want to preserve our rights and interests in the area of Toronto. So but this will definitely will help, and these transfer of payments agreements, we operate a number of agreements with Ontario. I know, Public Works has to enter into these agreements. We entered that agreement with our consultation funding from the New Relations program that we've been getting now for a number of years. So it is just to say, we give you the money, you audit the money, and we always do, because our auditors make sure it's spent right, and we're not outstepping our bounds. So they're just concerned that, and they know we audit all our financial statements. I don't foresee any problem with that, because we'll spend the money in accordance with what the principles are of the agreement, and we'll stay within that. And it's just a government procedure we have to follow through on these transfer payments agreements.
All right, thanks, Lonnie.
Okay, thanks, Lonnie. And I think to further to add, Greg, just for your information, I know we've been trying to kind of push back to increase that number across the board. Obviously not to this specific. I mean, to Lonnie's point, obviously it's in their eyes fair, but I think the other piece to it is always looking to try to look to, again, the highest that we can go, and when we go to these types of discussions. Sherilyn.
Yeah, just kind of just what Greg said regarding the money but also too, I think it was, what do we want? What do we want at Ontario Place? What do a Haudenosaunee Village? You know, if they're not going to put a village in there, then at least put some artwork around there that we're still here. And that's the thing that I want to sit there and get there for Ontario Places, that we haven't left. And we know that the other ones are going around and saying all this stuff. And Six Nations has been pretty quiet. So now I guess this is the time. What do we want to put in there? And what can we do to make it happen? So those are the things that I would like to see there, and to make sure that it's right up front. Thank you.
I think those are more good points to add. Thank you for that, Sherry Lynn. Taylor.
I just wanted to say that we have mentioned like education and artwork, and that the Six Nations history that needs to be there in some form in our talks with both Ontario, but also the other groups, that the privately owned ones that are coming in.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for that, Nyawa Taylor. Okay, I'm going to look to further questions and comments. And if there aren't any, I'll look to a mover and seconder on 6.5. Just want to acknowledge Nathan's comment in the chat that he does agree with Sherry Lynn and her points, and to take it further, as we have citizens living in Toronto, and I'd like to know their needs and what they want to see as well. I think it's a good point. Thank you for that, Nathan. Looking to further questions, comments. Okay, seeing or hearing none, I will call for a mover and seconder on recommendation 6.5.
I'll move it, Sherry Lynn.
Moved by Sherry Lynn, seconder.
I'll second.
Seconded by Carrie. Thank you to each of you. And again, further questions and comments. Seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Motion to waive second reading.
I'll move, Sherry Lynn.
Moved by
I'll
Sherry
second.
Lynn, seconded by Carrie. All in favor to waive second reading? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Okay, thank you. Lonnie, is there anything further on your end and team?
I don't think so. I think we've covered everything in the open session.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that, Lonnie and team, for bringing forward your items. We will then continue moving on our agenda at this point in time. We do have the Six Nations Cannabis Commission that will be providing a presentation. We're just getting set up here. All right, and you guys can shift. Okay. Sorry, if you could just bear with us, council, for 1 second. Just as we're getting set up, I'm going to move to scheduling. If I can, really quickly, then we'll go back to the Six Nations Cannabis Commission and their presentation. If you can move to your agendas under scheduling, you'll see we have 3 items on there. The first one is in relation to the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is requesting delegates to attend their unveiling ceremony, commemorating players who were inspired diversity in professional hockey. So Henry Elmer Miracle will be included in this ceremony on December 7th at 10:30 a.m. Again, located at 30 Yonge Street in Toronto. So I am looking for a representative to attend if there's any interest or availability of our council to attend the unveiling ceremony. Is anyone available? Oh, Michelle? Perfect. Sorry, Michelle, you're available to attend? Okay, thank you for that. I'll look to a mover and seconder to designate Councilor Michelle.
I'll move.
Moved by Sherry Lynn, seconded by Nathan. Are there any further questions or comments? And then Michelle Tammy will work with you for any other details that you may need. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. The second item under scheduling is in relation to the Chiefs of Ontario. There's the SCA, obviously from the coming up in Ottawa. This is again to deal with the Child Welfare Final Settlement Agreement prior to the AFN. So that will be on the Monday. So those, I think this kind of goes in tandem with the next resolution under scheduling. I know Councillor Greg Fraser has already put his name. I am looking for another counselor to attend alongside with the chief's office to then look to these items. So maybe just before I go, because we'll probably all travel in prior to and all attend this dinner meeting in relation to the child welfare final settlement. I know Arliss has been quite extensively involved in this piece as well. So really, I'm going to hold off on 2 and go right to 3 and add another counselor's name to the Ottawa Annual Assembly of First Nations. So that is December 5, 6, and 8. And Councillor Greg is already listed. Is there another councillor who would wish or is available to attend? Okay, I'm not seeing any availability or interest at this point, so we will look to again look to our okay, just a note, Nathan will be at the AFN again, but with the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council. So again, just for transparency, thank you for that, Nathan. Helen, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I would go with Greg, but I'm going to be off sick that week. What about Arliss? Is she going to be there?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, so we'll have definitely our technicians, and what I'll do is try to maybe balance out some things, much what we did at Chiefs with our staff, just seeing that we can't get another counselor to attend. So Greg and I will be quite busy that week because I know there's a couple of other items that we can further discuss at length. Okay, so that's okay, council. We'll look to again providing those pieces with our staff. So I will at this point in time go back to the Cannabis Commission again, who are just getting set up. Thank you so much, Nathan. Also, will be available to help Greg and I that week where need be. So thank you for that. Okay, they are just getting set up now. Looks like you should see on your screen the presentation. Again, I'll pass the floor over. We have our commissioners in the office here, Kathy Mayer, as well as Carl Hill. And they'll be able to provide us with a community update in terms of progress. So with that being said, I want to welcome both of them to our political liaison meeting this morning, and I'll pass the floor over to themselves to walk us through their progress update presentation, and then we'll take any further questions and comments at that point. So over to you, Kathy and Carl. Sorry, Councilor. Just want to confirm you could hear Kathy.
I can't hear.
Okay, just 1 second.
Testing 1, 2.
Thank you.
No problem. Good morning, Chief and Council. Wait, we got echo in here. We're presenting the progress update. I'm Kathy Mayer and Carl Hill.
Good morning, Chief and Council.
So I'm going through the PowerPoint presentation for the Cannabis Commission. But how come it doesn't work? Oh, there we go. And just to remind, our 4 key guiding principles is the protection of health and safety, protection of the environment, and community contribution, and prevention of a monopoly of the cannabis industry. We have myself as Chief Commissioner, Carl Hill as a Commissioner, Catherine Bomberry as a Commissioner, and Mike will not be a Commissioner. And we're putting the application out for commissioners. There is one out at Great, as well as we're posting one on the different social networks. Six Nations Cannabis Commission. As you're aware, we have the Certificate of Incorporation, June 6, 21.
We have the Six Nations Cannabis Commission Corporation bylaw, Articles 1 to 13 that dictate how we are to run. As well as the cannabis control law that was enacted June 21st of 21. The Six Nations Cannabis Commission Financial Management Policy of March 22 this year. The entire Six Nation Cannabis Commission and staff have changed from April to October of 22. So the current commission is working very hard at organizing everything. We're working at building better relationships with the community, and we're utilizing all the community knowledge over the consultants from September 22. What can the Six Nations Cannabis Commission do now? Show the community action by building relationships with the Six Nations community, department, organizations, give back to the Six Nations community for future developments, create opportunities for Six Nations band members through training, education, employment, mentorship, tap into the existing knowledge that we have here at the Six Nations regarding the cannabis industry. What we need from council. Today, we're looking for a motion that directs all Six Nations departments to work collaboratively and notify the commission on anything involving cannabis. And we have received that. And thank you to all chief and council for that. We already have departments notifying us, and we also have presentations coming up in the new year. Moving forward, we need an extension of the MOU, which we have planned, budget discussions and approval, which we have planned in the weeks to come, and approval of an indemnify agreement, which is also in the works. And you can see that in just a short time that we presented this, how much has been going on. Political advocacy, continue pressure from all levels of government to officially recognize our regulations and our laws. A bank account, we need political advocacy on that. Health Canada and Attorney General relationships. Better communication all around. Having a full complement of staff. Well, yes, Audrey. Audrey?
Can you go back a slide, please?
I certainly can. This one?
Okay, your top one there, continued pressure from all levels of government.
Yes.
Do you mean your continuing pressure on all levels of government?
My continued
bylaw.
council's continued pressure.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, council's continued pressure, because politically, you can help me out here. Carl can help.
We'll just make
I'm just
recommendations.
asking about the all levels. You continue pressure
Provincial, federal,
from
yeah,
all levels
provincial,
of government.
federal.
Aren't you putting pressure on all levels of government?
Are we? No.
Or are you expecting the council to put pressure on all?
Yes,
levels?
we are. Yes, we are. Municipal, federal, provincial, yes.
Okay, your statement there then needs to be changed.
Certainly, noted. Any other questions, Audrey?
Pardon me?
Anything else? Carl has something to add.
Just to add to that, Councillor, we will only make recommendations to full council who will lobby on our behalf to pressure the outside government with the chief and council. It's only a recommendation from us and to the political leaders in the community here.
Okay, it's just the wording, Carl, that I'm talking about here. You're putting from all levels of government, but you're putting it on all levels of government. The words have to be changed
Okay.
to accurately describe your meaning.
Okay.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Better communication, revise and update the Six Nations Cannabis Commission website. As you'll notice, that has been changed and will continue to be changed as more information comes about. Simplify the applications and the checklist, host monthly and annual events. Six Nations Cannabis Commission office, we have the keys to the office. We're just putting some paint, and we need to get a few desks so they don't have to sit on the floor. And we'll be located at the Iroquois Plaza at the Suites. We have offices there. We'll be making amendments. We'll be putting forth amendments to Six Nations about the law and the regulations. We'll simplify the forms. We'll offer assistance to retailers, to providers, offer free, I can't see all this, offer free advertisements to participants, producers, and retailers who are involved with the Cannabis Commission. We'll talk with the producers, provide quarterly reports to council, offer training for community members and bud tenders. These are all different ways that we can think of right now to increase and for better communication between the Cannabis Commission and the community. What the future can look like for Six Nations Cannabis Commission. We can review the laws annually to ensure it continues to meet the needs of Six Nations. As you're aware, this always changes. To improve communications with producers, retailers, and sovereign cannabis industry experts. We'll have a grand opening of the Six Nations Cannabis Commission office. We'll increase information on the types of regulated cannabis available on the territory. We'll increase the information on the different types that's available. We'll have a full complement of cannabis staff and commissioners who can govern and not be heavily involved in administration. A system, continue to work on a system to do nation-to-nation trading and distribution. Looking towards having a testing facility for all cannabis products, but an independent testing facility that all products can go there. And we're working on a couple proposals on that right now. The Six Nations Cannabis Commission was established to develop a legal cannabis regulatory regime to support community-owned and operated cannabis business with the Six Nations community. Our role is to ensure that the cannabis business meets safety standards and not to micromanage the day-to-day decisions of entrepreneurs through unnecessary red tape. And that ends our presentation.
Thanks. Sorry, we're just stopping the share screen. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy and Carl, for joining us this morning. Again, we are looking at, obviously the transparency communication as highlighted through Kathy's presentation, I think is a huge area of progress that we need to continue to work on. But I will open the floor up at this point in time for any further questions or comments. I know, again, the biggest the biggest piece for us was to make sure that we're making sure the community is well aware of what's happening at the commission level at this point, where they plan to go into the future. And again, I think Kathy's laid that out clearly in terms of some of the work that, since we've seen the presentation, but the progress that we've seen as well, I think is again looking to do this in a more timely manner. I see Greg has his hand raised.
Yeah, hi Kathy, hi Carl. I just had a comment and a couple of questions. Like, so far this industry on reserve has really gotten ahead of us. It's like, I think I mentioned it to another counselor, that it's like a runaway train.
Yep.
And you can't even see the train. And I commend you on trying to rein it in, because it does look like a difficult task. Because I just go by what the community has, the comments that they give me. But I can see that the objectives are clear. The timelines, I'd like to see more timelines, what your objectives are, when do you want to reach them. And the other thing is a little bit of a road to financial independence. The community says to me that we have spent over $5 to $6 million on the Cannabis Commission, which isn't true. But that's just the perception of the community, you know, it could be 2.5, it becomes 5. But that's just the way community reacts to certain numbers. And that's basically what I would like to see. I'd like to see some numbers and projections. And I've got another comment. I don't know if you can see this or not. This is sold on our territory. I don't know if you can see. You see it? It's called Space Drops. It's got sugar in it. It says on the top of it, prescription only, but you can just buy it. You can just buy it at the weed shop. It's a Space Drops. It's 1,000 milligrams. It's 1,000 milligrams gummies, and there's 2 in a pack. And the flavors you can get are apple, cherry, peach, tropical, blueberry, and passion. This is a little bit misleading. 1, because they're buying it without a prescription. 2, it actually looks toward children and younger users. You can see that. It's almost like a cartoon, right? So this type of advertising, are you going to address this and see if you can enforce, like even in your Cannabis Commission regulations, you specifically say that it has to be in plain packaging, no sugar, not flavored. And also, I think it really misleads the public on what we're trying to do here, being safe to the community. Are you going to address like issues like this? That was my question. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner, Councillor Gregg. That is one of the many areas. Currently, in the territory, we have a number of all the retailers are not regulated. So you will find not only that product, but many other products out there. Well, there are some that are geared towards children. And that's part of our role, is to have safe, regulated cannabis on the territory. But as you had mentioned earlier, we have to reel in the train because there are many retailers who don't feel the need to be a part of the Cannabis Commission. There are some who are waiting and seeing how we move forward, what we do, what I talked about earlier, that action piece. They're waiting to see how we react and the movement going forward. So that will be one of many areas that we'll be addressing.
Thank you, Greg, for bringing that forward, and Kathy for your responses. I'm going to continue to open the floor up for any further questions or comments. Again, as noted, you know, it's clear within community, it's clear within, you know, this table itself, that the community, you know, we need to look at the areas, and I think the most highlighted piece for us is the amendments, you know, those contributions, you know, all those pieces. Because I think the market has become saturated in a sense somewhat, but I think at the end of the day, you know, to Kathy's point is, you know, this is exactly why the council decided, or rather the community was for the safety of everybody, you know, far before a profit. So I think that's something, you know, that we need to continue to support our commission in, to make sure that these products, as you've, you know, just give an example, Greg, you know, don't get into the hands of young people who shouldn't have these types of products. We've already seen through different police reports, you know, of these cases happening, in situations happening within community, and I think that's something where we need to again continue to support our commission in order to do their work. I know there's also the other side of enforcement, which I know we're working on the political pieces. That's even further adding to the advocacy, as mentioned from Audrey's point of looking at all levels of government to get that support of our regulations and laws, and what that means from a provincial lens, from a federal lens, right down to the community lens. So I think there's a number of pieces that are being worked on, and I too have to commend you know, the commission, because this has not been an easy task since the beginning. I mean, we've all went and you know, through this you know, this challenge, but I think at the end of the day, we still have to maintain the safety of everybody, and I think that's the most important point at this time. Hazel has her hand raised.
I would just like to ask the question about how many current permit holders do we have with the commission?
We're in discussion. Whoops. We're in discussion with a number of retailers, and we have 2 producers on board right now. And 1 more coming. Now we're more than 1 coming online. We're just in the midst of getting everything going, Hazel. So I can't give you definite numbers, but I can tell you that we're working with a number of retailers and producers.
So just to clarify, I guess you would monitor anybody that's with a permit. Like, how do you prevent anyone establishing a monopoly on this? That's my question.
Mhm. It's a good question. We're giving all the producers the same opportunities. Everyone will be able to sell safe, regulated cannabis. We're supporting those people, and we're trying to prevent a monopoly. If, just like right now, we have a number of unregulated cannabis retailers out there, we can't put the hammer down on everyone. Everybody has free choice, but we can certainly educate them on the importance of having safe, regulated cannabis on the territory and distributing from the territory.
So I guess just going back to this little package that Greg showed, like, to me, this is a sign of illegal activity, like now.
So illegal.
And that little man's picture on this container, it would signify to a child like some of the toys that they're interested in. So, and if this is prescription only, why would it be sold in anywhere? Like what Greg said, the train has gone ahead of everybody, and it seems like we're running to catch up, and it's scary. It feels scary because I don't want to say we're so far behind. I know you are working hard to get a commission that's, you know, and I wish you all the best in that, but it's just what's happened up till now. And when you see stuff like this that Greg's showing us, it just makes you feel leery of where's the control? Is it years down the road?
I think, Hazel, I don't believe it's years down the road. All community members are concerned about the safety of cannabis on the territory. What Greg showed, that's just only one example of what's out there right now.
Oh.
And that's one of the areas, the main areas that the Cannabis Commission is trying to stop. Because right now you have not only that package, but I could give you 1,000 pictures of what's being sold on the territory right now. None of it is regulated, none of it is tested, or if the testing, they test for everything but pesticides. They don't test for any carcinogens or anything along that line. So we need to encourage, and then I think, and we're going along with what the community wants, safety. Because we don't want, the Cannabis Commission does not want those products out there, and they wouldn't be in the stores if they were part of the Cannabis Commission. Everything in the retail stores would all be tested. They would have a stamp on it to show that it was tested, and you would know. So that product that Greg showed would not be in a Cannabis Commission store.
Okay, thanks, Kathy, for your responses. And again, I think this is the important piece for us is how, you know, because the community has, know, we've had our issues loud and clear. But I think at the end of the day is how do we then progress in a way of making sure, like I said, it's all dependent upon the action that I think that we need to take. But it's also about, I think, getting creative in a sense of the business side of things. I think that's the other piece that we have to look at. But you know, now it's to Kathy's earlier point of, you know, the discussions that they're in conversation with now with retailers. It's really looking to see what we do now in the decisions that are being made and moving forward. So I think that's really dependent upon, you know, us to look at those amendments to the laws and the regulations, to look at the areas of concern. I know it was listed in the chat from Rod in relation to environmental concerns. You know, those all are within the law itself. But again, it's how do we make sure, again, that it's being respected in a sense. I think that's the biggest hurdle that we have to look at jumping over with our community support. Kathy?
And we also have 2 more employees coming on board. One's going to work strictly on community outreach and working with the community all the time. The other is going to do a similar role, but also just working with the community, working with the retailers, working with producers, seeing exactly what the needs are, how can we assist them. But we are working on that.
Thanks. Thank you for that, Kathy. I see Michelle and then over to Helen.
I actually think Audrey, Helen were before me.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Sorry, Michelle. Audrey, did you still have your hand up? I apologize.
No, that's a new hand, Mark.
Okay, my apologies. So thanks for that, Michelle. I'll start with Audrey, over to Helen, then Michelle. Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you guys. Sago, Carl. Hazel was on the right track. And I think we have to really make sure of this because there's already 3 people that we know now who are connected. So the monopoly has already started on Six Nations. You can't go down Highway 54 and it looks like, starting to look like tying an egg down here. So we have to move. And I guess I want to know also your relationship with Six Nations, please. How this is going to be monitored, what bylaws you need written to help. And also, I guess we can get this, I don't know if you know it or it can become from the police, but how many drug gangs are involved on Six Nations in this market that is people who do not want to work with the Six Nations Cannabis Commission, and they're being supplied with these illegal drugs. So if you could answer any of those, that would be great. You know,
We wouldn't know those are things.
Audrey, we wouldn't know the drug statistics on the territory. We're
Pardon me?
strictly cannabis and only cannabis. Oops. Can you hear me?
didn't hear your question.
As far as all the sites that are on, all the shops on 54, none of those are regulated. So we can't.
So there's nothing you can do there to close them down.
I think that's where I know even too, sorry, just to interject really quickly, that's where, you know, we've met with the police. Obviously, you know, there's areas of capacity issues within the force itself. I mean, their focus right now that you see is more on the hard illicit drugs, not so much the cannabis industry at this time. I think this is where it gives us the opportunity to work with our community on these pieces to make sure that ensuring all health and safety measures are in place. So that kind of, I think, relies both on the commission and the council, I think, to really come up with that strategy collectively and what that looks like. So that's more ongoing work, I would say, in my view.
Agree.
I hope that answers your question, Audrey. I'm going to continue moving down the list here. If you don't, Audrey, did you have further follow-up?
I guess it would be nice to know, like some councilors have already asked, who are the legitimate stores that are working with the Six Nations Cannabis Commission? And can we get a list of them? And where are they located?
Yeah, so And I think that's Kathy's alluded to the point right
And
now that they're
retailers.
currently in discussions with retailers. I think once those have been solidified, then the commission can bring forward that list and what that looks like.
And we will be posting it on our website.
Okay, thanks.
To have it updated as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Audrey. Helen, then over to Michelle.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think the Cannabis Commission is putting a really good foot forward just by being in an open meeting. This is the first one of this is probably one of 2 open meetings on cannabis that's ever happened over the past 2 years. So I give you credit for doing that.
Thank you.
And I like the fact that you're really working on communication. One of the things that I really have an interest in, and I don't know if we could ever find out, but I would like to know, I don't know if it's possible to find out how much money the cannabis industry is really bringing to Six Nations. Because the Cannabis Commission is intended to be run by the contributions from the retailers and the production people. I think we need to try and figure out, I'm thinking right now that we're not going to meet that. The retailers that we have are not going to meet that financial need, because I honestly do not think the retailers are lining their pockets. I think they might be making enough money to keep their families, pay their bills and stay out of debt, but I don't think they're lining their pockets by any means, because there's so many. And they're everywhere. There's one going up next to me already. There's another one going up next to me on my road. I mean, they're still building a little mini shack. So in terms of the financial aspect, we really need to start looking at that, because the Cannabis Commission is an incorporated body and they're not supposed to be funded by a government financial. We shouldn't even be doing that, but we are, because we know the Cannabis Commission didn't have any money to get started. So we need to look at the financial and kind of do some kind of projection. I know those consultants we had working with us, that's why they raised it. They raised the contribution up to 35%, because they knew that the 8% that the law had talked about wasn't going to cover the financial needs of the commission, at least not while they were working there. So I think the finances is going to be a big thing, because I honestly don't think these people are making what we think they're making. I think the money is going to be in the production. That's where the money is going to be. So I'm glad to see that you have some more production companies lined up. Because I really think if we get any kind of a contribution, a sizable contribution, I think that's where it's going to come from. So those are just my thoughts. I don't know if we can get a handle on what the cannabis industry is bringing to Six Nations, because like you said, nobody is under the commission. Everybody's on their own. So they're not likely to, to share how much they're doing or anything, but that's just my thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Helen. I'll maybe go to the commission for any response, particularly to Helen's point. I think one important piece that we have to always, I think, keep in mind as well is we didn't ask for this. We have to look at what Canada did. Yes. And again, the duty of lack of engagement in any decision that obviously impacts our territories. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, we had to react to Canada's decision of recreational use and sale. But I think that's where we also, I think, politically can get creative in a sense of, recouping any potential dollars lost, because this is something that we have had to build upon, making sure the health and safety of all of our members is at the forefront. And that's something that the federal government failed to keep us in the loop on making any decisions when it came to recreational cannabis. So I think at the end of the day, it's getting creative politically as well, in addition to the financial pieces. But maybe perhaps I'll shift over to Kathy for any further responses.
I agree with the chief. we're at the point now that we're almost behind. We're not going to interfere with any business making money on the territory. We want to ensure that what the businesses are doing, that they're selling safe, regulated cannabis. We have the council approved laws and regulations. That's what we're trying to enforce. But we also have to, like the earlier presentation, we need to have better communication. This is one avenue. We're not going to fix everything overnight, but we need education. We need support from council. We need to talk with the cannabis experts here on the territory. We're working through that, and that all takes time. Moving to Helen's point, we got a loan from council. We didn't get council to fund us. We have a loan that we're paying back, or that we need to pay back. We want to pay back, but everything needs to be done properly. We don't want to put the cart before the horse. And so we're doing this very methodically to ensure that we do it properly and that everything that we're doing, we're transparent and accountable. So both the community and council knows what we're doing.
Okay, thank you, Kathy, for your responses. Michelle.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Carl, for presenting this morning. It is, it has been a challenging 2 years to bring this forward, and I think this speaks to what our community, we still have to build that trust. I think we'll struggle. People think we're turning into municipalities, so we have to quash those rumors, because in the end, we want to be safe for our community. And I really like the lens you're putting on the public health. Now we really need to ensure that who's in our community are adhering to health standards. And unfortunately, I would say for the majority, they aren't. So kudos to those who you've reached out to and who are part of the commission. So what I'm looking for as we move forward is you're documenting gaps. You're really compiling a lot of information to show where we need to go in the future. Also with that, it would be nice that you come and present to community every quarter and bring some numbers with you with respects to what the commission is doing. So thanks for your initial presentation. But yeah, I think we have a long way to go.
Over to you, Kathy.
Yeah, we'll be reporting every quarterly to the chief and council. Any developments will be on our Six Nations Cannabis website. We're trying to make that as easy to read as possible, so everybody, and since we have an office, people are more than welcome to come by the office and ask any questions. We are working on getting a telephone, but in the meantime, we do have a info at SNCannabis.com. Anybody can feel free to email us and ask questions. We have implemented a policy that we will respond to all inquiries within 2 business days. So you can expect that as well.
Thanks for that. And actually, can I just jump on Rod's comment about the environmental standards, and have you looked at that? Because I think very similar with tobacco, now cannabis, I mean, it does. You can smell it. The odor is there. And so is that on your timeline of like a regulatory framework with respects to environment?
The terpenes for what you smell are the terpenes. For any indoor cannabis, you shouldn't be able to smell that. Now, if it's outdoor, that's a different story. But as far as a production facility that has an indoor facility for growing cannabis, according to our regulations, you should not be able to smell that. Again, that would be unregulated.
Okay, thanks, Kathy and Michelle. I think Michelle, raises good points to Rod's, earlier comments in terms of the environmental aspects. I mean, I think this is exactly again why we had to respond to this, because there are environmental, we are currently still seeing it now. with different industries on the territory. And I think that's something where we're trying to, again, starting to address that. I think this relates back to, again, community standards. You've probably seen this whole morning. There's a big part of community standards I think that we need to focus on in terms of governance and political advocacy that we got to start to implement, and to get, obviously our police involved, all community organizations, pertaining to each sector. Like that's important. I think that's something in governance lane that we could further assist and support the commission in their work that they do, for one example. And I think that's something, just on the environmental piece, that we need to engage in further to see how we're making sure that that is a priority, as listed in their guiding principles as well. So I think there's a lot of work to do, as noted. I think this is a meeting first of many to come, and to make sure that community is informed. Again, we can't, to Michelle's point of, we have to quash as much as we can in terms of rumors, because there is a lot of misinformation out in community, and there's a lot of perceptions that are made up upon misinformation. I think that's something that the commission has their work cut out for them, in terms of which they've listed their communication strategies and efforts that they want to do, and to change that perception, and to make sure that there is good information, actually factual information out in the community. Because at the end of the day, it's for health and safety. I mean, anybody, we have to put that priority always at the forefront, way before profits, because again, it's about protecting our community, and that's, I think, exactly what the work is of the commission. So do appreciate the commission as well. I know, just for those who are interested, it's not a first. There isn't a big lineup of members on the commission, but if you are interested and want to get involved and learn more, or know somebody who is interested, I mean, and by all means, please reach out to their office. As noted, they will be having a working phone line soon, but in the interim, they are available via the email address provided. I think at the end of the day, it's up to all of us as a community, I would say at this point, to see this as a success. It's relying on our business people within the industry. It's relying on our community members, our parents, our teachers, our educators. Everybody plays a role into making sure that the health and safety is of the utmost priority. In addition to obviously the leadership here in the commission as well, there's a lot of work amongst all of us, and I think it's important to move forward in the best way possible. So I do appreciate the commission and the work that they are doing. To again further the communication, to further the transparency, further the accountability, and to really start to put out the factual information to all of this, because I always kind of get frustrated when I'm talking to members as well, because I'm like, well, that's not true. Where did you hear that from? Here's the truth. And I think that's where these open sessions, a lot of the times too, it's been, I think, perceived as doing things behind closed doors. And I think that's to Helen's point, where we need to quash that and to really have these discussions openly. At the end of the day, it's about transparency, and it's about health and safety. And I think those are key priorities in moving forward. So do also want to say now to Kathy and Carl. I know Catherine was unavailable to make it today, but still there are members who still care about our community and want to make sure that we have the best interests of everybody. And that's really the purpose. So I do want to say now to them, and look forward to the next presentation, and look forward to the progress. I mean, I think, again, it's all going to be telling upon the actions that we do and the decisions that we make now in order to make the commission on a right path. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, I will look for a motion to accept the presentation on behalf of the Cannabis Commission as information at this time. Is there a mover and seconder to that effect?
I'll move.
Moved by Michelle, seconder. Second by Helen. Further comments or questions? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. So once again, Nyawa, Kathy, and Carl for joining us this morning at Political Liaison, and do look forward to the further progress being made on behalf of the commission. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, council, I'm going to continue moving along here down the agenda. We now are shifting into councillor reports. We have 2 reports from Councillor Greg Fraser on meetings attended. I know they're on his second one. There's going to be a bigger report in relation to the Chiefs of Ontario. And so that's something that I think we can further discuss at our next upcoming meeting. I know we received our email from Helen as well, who has a further report, who attended the Chiefs of Ontario. So for now, what I'll do is pass the floor over to Councillor Greg to provide his reports on his meetings attended.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. The first one we've already reviewed. We did it verbally, but I thought it would be best to put it on paper and send it out. That is the facilitative Indigenous application process for medical school at McMaster. And the committee members were mostly from Six Nations, and they had some affiliation with, and some were actually employed by the University of McMaster's. Others had a advisory role. And there were 27 applicants, and 9 of them were moving on, were accepted. So the committee's main role was to see how Indigenous the applicants were, I guess, to verify their status. And then after that, they were then moved on to the proper application for medical school. And that was going to be covered by McMaster. So this committee did not have a say in the final acceptance or refusal of these candidates. There were no candidates from Six Nations. And I thought that it was more administrative, the role. And my recommendation was basically due to the lack of authority of this committee to have a final say. I didn't think it was necessary for council to be on this committee. It was more administrative than it was any political advocacy involved. And but I suppose we could obtain a report if need be, or if the council needs it, from one of the members of the committee, as they are close to Six Nations. Any questions?
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Greg, for bringing this forward. I know, again, you did verbally update us on the specifics, but this one is now as a recommendation. I do agree with your recommendation in terms of, no longer requiring an elected representative on this committee. Is there any further questions or comments specifically to Greg's first report? Audrey?
Just get my mute off here. Yeah, there might be some time though when there may need political advocacy. When there are people who come and they present themselves as First Nations and they're not. And their words aren't being listened to by the institution, there has to be a route for them to take in order to, I guess, that political voice to make sure that people aren't given jobs under false pretenses. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. And perhaps maybe that's where, to Greg's point of, still having that communication to then look at a representative, in those cases, as you've mentioned, Audrey, in the future. But it doesn't necessarily have to be an elected representative. We have many other, I think, individuals in the education sector who also can be, of assistance through this committee. So I think that's something that we can further discuss. But looking to Greg, or sorry, I see Helen has her hand raised.
Yeah, I agree with Greg. I've been saying things over the past few years about sitting on all these external committees, and all you do is administrative work, nothing political at all. So I agree with Greg that I'm assuming if there is a political issue that comes up, that we do have reps from this community sitting there, I do believe, people that work for MAC or whatever, that might bring it to our attention. But we got to start getting out of this external administration stuff, because we've got so many issues we're supposed to be dealing with. That's, to me, is more important for our community.
Thanks, Helen, for your comments as well. looking to Greg further follow-up, and I do agree with Helen in terms of the administrative external committees and so forth.
Yes, the reason I volunteered to go to this committee, I just wanted to see how McMaster starts this application process. I thought that I would see either the Dean of Admissions or even the Associate Dean of Medicine, and that would be a role that I could play in terms of advocacy. As you will see later on when we look at our healthcare issues, I thought that might be an inroad. But I found out that none of those players were present. And so it really didn't help politically on an advocacy role. And to the chief's point that, yeah, we could have a representative, someone from health or education to give us a report back.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And just a further FYI, and I mentioned this when you verbally brought this forward as well. I'm currently the community co-chair at the Indigenous Education Council at MAC, which again deals with a lot of the political pieces, which Greg, I can further get you involved as well if you're interested. Because again, there's a lot of work happening at MAC, not particularly in this, in the acceptance area, but rather the governance side of things. And that's where actually we do meet with the dean and so forth. And I think that may be of interest of you as well that we could further discuss off the line. Melba?
Yes, I think report had mentioned possibly bringing back 2020 vision. And we know that it appears that it's been successful. I wanted to say when it comes to, we've struggled with this for years with admin and political. Now we continue, and I hope that's going to be a discussion point when we retreat, because it's like conflict of interest. It's never really resolved, We have different ideas of what conflict of interest is. I think when it comes to admin, it's really important. As Nathan said, he mentioned the pot. Well, we need to know what is in the pot in order to handle those situations and needs of the community, whether it's political or referrals, like complaints. There's a lot of complaints that I know I have had a few sent over to Joe, and he's doing a good job, by the way. And also community needs assistance. They don't always come to council as a whole. They come to community members. That's what they're accustomed to doing. They don't know all the services. If they have not utilized the service, they do not know where to go. So what do? They come to us. So we make referrals as necessary. There's a lot of housing issues. And of course, you have environmental issues, which has become political to a certain extent. So we know what that pot's about, but we need to know what is in that pot and how to handle it and who's going to. So I guess in the past, it's been mentioned that we won't handle that. That's political. And that's really great, because right there and then it's referred to one of the departments by our offices that are in charge, the team that's in charge, which is mentioned many times. So let's not completely say it's administration, because it isn't always like that. So we're doing hard work out there, whether you understand it. We don't always bring it to the forefront on housing issues, referrals, assistance. I'm still doing settlement agreement. I'm still doing day schools, those kind of things. And I'm sure you're doing the same thing. You're handling situations that you can refer. So we not only are changing the way we do things, but how do you change the way that people come to you for help? There is no way you're going to do that unless they know exactly what the services are. So that needs to be out there even more. We don't have, like, look at, for example, social. how many departments they have that deal with help for the people. So when we have presentations, which not everyone gets on Zoom, we need presentations in person for the community. And I know we complain at times that, the people that really need help are not there. So we need to somehow do a better job and get more creative, I guess, how we meet the needs of the people, so they won't be always referring to we as counselors. Thanks.
Okay, thanks Melba for your comments as well. Again, I think there's good points in all comments raised, but just getting back to Greg's report slide, there is a recommendation on the floor, or that is recommended from Greg at 9.1, that we no longer require an elected representative at the facility, the Indigenous application process for McMaster School of Medicine. So that being said, is there a mover and seconder to that effect? I think we could maybe even add, Greg, if it comes above, or if it comes up that, we may need a representative, that we would still look to include a Six Nations rep, just to Audrey's point.
Yeah, I agree, Chief.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Is there a mover? Moved by Helen, seconder? Second by Audrey. Further questions, comments? Seeing or hearing none, motion, or all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. The second one, Chiefs of Ontario on economic development. So this was a side session, a night meeting after the assembly. I know, Greg, we all had split up. Some went to, I believe it was health, education and environment. So those will be all forthcoming as well. So this portion is on the side meetings of the assembly itself. Greg?
Yeah, this is, you're right. This was a side meeting at the Chiefs of Ontario, the middle of November. We had a little glitch in the meeting. About halfway through the meeting, we lost the feed from our chair, which was Arvind Sharma, but we didn't, and in the end, we didn't have quorum anyway. So mainly the meeting was just to pass along some information. And the RBC presentation was done by two representatives from RBC. And then there were updates from the Economic Development Department. And then, of course, the last is to review this banking resolution that they're going to put forth. And then there's been a change. They had planned to do the next meeting of the Chiefs of Ontario in December at AFN, but recently there was an emergency meeting. It was called today for 2:00, and I requested to have the information from that meeting passed along to Sherry Lynn and myself, and so we'll get the information from that meeting. The highlights of the meeting was RBC. RBC is pretty much RBC. We reviewed what economic development programs they had in place, but it's pretty much they treat First Nations without any preference. So we didn't get any preferential interest rates. They didn't, co-signers had to be often applied to any small business loans. And often, sometimes in some of these communities, the band had to be a co-signer. So the RBC is pretty much, like I said, is RBC. And also they have the option of closing large businesses with large cash deposits at any time. If they feel there's an excessive amount of cash coming through your business, which a lot of our businesses do have, they have the right to just stop dealing with you. And that came up a couple of times, especially with Steve Williams and GRE. And but they had no answer back. So that's sort of how it ended. The other portion, they gave us an economic update on this this Indigenous Service Ontario has granted $25 million over 3 years to the regions for economic development. It wasn't clear, well, we lost the feed, but it wasn't clear how the disbursement was going to be made. The mechanism, we asked about it. And as far as we could understand, the disbursement went to the regions. The regions would then notify all the economic development departments, and then there was some type of application process. But we had lost the feed at that point, so we couldn't get a clear answer. And I, at that point, said, okay, well, we'll attend the meeting at the AFN, and we'll try to go back to that and see if we can get clarification on the application process. To me personally, 25 million over 3 years for 133 Indigenous groups is not very much. But that, and they also stated that 6 million of this 25 had to be released by March. I think it's by the end of March. Again, it would be released to the regions. I guess the application process would come from individual bands to that region, and it would be dispersed that way. That's the way I understood it. And it was left at that. So, and the last point was the resolution. As you know, there is, it describes the First Nations' inherent right to develop their own banking system. And it had several comments about that. And also it would be reviewed further because we kind of ran out of time at the AFN meeting. But I have a feeling it'll be reviewed today at 2 o'clock. And again, we'll probably get that information sent to us. So far as political action is concerned, I was recommending that our committee member or members attend whatever meeting they have, if they have it at the AFN, and try to get some clarification on disbursement of that money, and also review that resolution. Everyone felt that the RBC, I would say RBC pretty much treats the Indigenous business like any other business, and that there was no preferential treatment, there was no economic development incentive for them. So as far as political action, there's really no political action at this time other than attending the next meeting.
Okay, thank you so much, Greg, for providing us with that update. I know there's a lot of moving pieces, as you know, or may be aware. We had put forward a banking resolution as well. I know this is more for the collective now at this point. However, we did have that with that was supposed to be tabled last assembly, but there was that was on the late resolutions committee, so that didn't get to the table. So it was upcoming at this next SCA. At the AFN. So I know that was again in reference to just much like what the work's happening at the Economic Development Committee level at the Chiefs of Ontario. So I do appreciate you bringing this information forward. I see Nathan has his hand raised, and then over to Helen.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, for the report. Great work. And what I will say is this: it makes sense from a collective standpoint, in my experience working at Chiefs of Ontario, that the banking issue be front and center. And they look at that advocacy piece. I'm just going to be blunt and honest. Their agenda and their strategy for economic development at Chiefs of Ontario makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to me. And you know, if they want to become a distribution center, you know, all power to them, but they're going to get criticized left, right, and center because we all know what formula they're going to use. That formula that they're going to use is the RAMA fund, because that's the only formula out there. We always turn to it in every facet, whether it's child welfare, whether it's education, whether it's social services, we go back to that one formula. So, you know, I don't think there's any question on how that's going to get distributed. You know, the formula is there and it is what it is. Whether or not, you know, I don't know whether or not strategically we participate in further active. You know, like I said, it doesn't make any sense. The distribution piece, I think we have to be there now because, you know, that's money that we can't leave on the table, and we really need to kind of look at how best we could utilize those funds coming into active. But at the same time, I'm just, I think we have to ask for clarity. You know, what's the mandate of this work that's going on active? Does it make sense for us to be participating? Yeah, and really, you know, take that stuff out of it because I think it's confusing, but really focus on the banking issue because I do believe that that is something that the Chiefs of Ontario can take hold of, and if done right, they can maneuver that as they will because that is a collective issue. I think we all have that in common across Ontario. Yeah, but I don't understand this other nonsense that's going on at that economic development table. So I'll just leave my comments there.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. I do agree with you as well. I think if anything, that the committee itself should focus primarily on the banking issue, just to Nathan's point. So totally agree with Nate on those pieces. And Helen.
Yeah, just in terms of the 25 million that I was going to say, Jeff, that Greg is talking about. The distribution part of it, it's probably going to end up going to all the PTOs, and then Six Nations being an independent is probably going to be at the bottom of the rung, which we usually are when it comes to this kind of stuff. But the 25 million, we wouldn't be able to even have it go over to our Economic Development Corporation because they can't access government funding. I think Matt said last time because of them being for profit type thing. So I'd be a little curious to see how they're going to do that. And I agree with Nathan too that, I don't even think the Chiefs know what they're doing. I gathered that from when I sat in the education meeting. I sat in the education meeting. I think me and Tammy and Jill were in there. And we have so many education committees and so many education boards and so many education associations taking the money, the education money. And most of the time, you don't even know what half of them are doing. But it sounded to me like they didn't have a good relationship with the AFN. So there was a big thing there. And it was really just about what the Chiefs is going through for all that stuff. And I felt like I was wasting my time sitting there. So I didn't even take much notes to even do a report. Plus, we didn't have no heat in that room. And it was absolutely freezing. So yeah, I'm thinking about the 25 million. Like, we don't have an economic development department no more to put in for money like that because we just have the DEF Corps.
Thanks, Helen, and I do, again agree with some of your comments as well. I think it's we just have to re-strategize, I guess, in the sense of what is our next best step when it comes to. I know we've talked about this for many years in relation to the Chiefs of Ontario and the AFN and so forth, because there's a lot of, I think, on the collective front and issues, and we always know information is going to be passed down and so forth, and obviously when it comes to funding and those pieces. But a lot of the times it's questionable in terms of, what are we getting out of this? And what, those pieces I think is always been, the highlight of the outcomes of these, sessions and assemblies and so forth. Greg?
Yes, to Helen's point, yeah, I was kind of questioning the use of that committee. The other thing is they could provide us a report. We could ask for a report, or they could provide us a report. I didn't find it very useful sitting there. I know Christopher and I were there. The issue of cannabis did come up, and of course with RBC, and they don't want to have anything to do with it, opening up accounts or really doing any businesses with them. So I didn't find much use to the meeting. And even when we asked, just to Helen's point about disbursement of that money, they didn't really know. So it was really an unproductive meeting. And if the council makes a decision today to not send anyone or ask for a report, I'd be all for that. Thanks.
Can I just make another comment, Mark?
Sure, go ahead, Helen.
Yeah, I forgot to mention with the education workshop or whatever, I guess information session, they're dealing mostly with the schools that have taken over their education. That's mainly what she was talking about, was all of them, you know, the schools that have already done it, and the regional education agreements and stuff like that. Six Nations doesn't really fit in there because we haven't taken over our education. So it was good information to hear, but I mean, we didn't fit into that information session because we haven't taken over education. So that's normally what they talk about mostly now, is the ones that have taken it over, and that kind of leaves us out of the picture because nobody talks about us, just the ones that have taken it over. So
Okay, thanks for that, Helen, as well. I see Nathan has his hand up, and then over to Audrey.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. And just back to Greg's point, I think we do kind of keep a rep only for a certain time frame on ECDEV. I agree with Greg. We need to get that report to kind of help us explain like what it is they want to do, and really, you know, mandate check, just all those checkbox, right? That we need to look at strategically at the Chiefs of Ontario. Get that report, and once we get that report, hopefully we can get it before the retreat, and we make a determination at the retreat strategically how best to kind of situate ourselves. You know, we might just send a letter, do an allocation, and say, hey, you know, send us this allocation, and then the rest of you guys can fight over the rest. Like, we need to kind of position ourselves in that manner, rather than kind of because I think the first thing we got to do is really figure out what it is they're doing, and I think that report will be helpful on that.
Yeah, I agree. Just for the time being, you know, I still think we should maintain just to those points that you've raised as well, Nathan, at that specific committee. But then we can look to again further strategize our own in terms of next steps. Audrey.
Yeah, I sit on the what used to be called FNECUs, now the CTC, Chiefs and Technical Language and Learning Committee, and I find it quite beneficial. I ask about Six Nations when I'm at those meetings, as well as a lot of these First Nations have already taken over their education. We're the only ones in us and Bay of Quinte who have not. So there are a lot of them, especially like First Nations with schools, that committee, and as well as others in of the other 133 First Nations are asking for more funding now. So that's what they're trying to do is work on the gaps, ask for more funding, and by us learning from what they're asking for and their gaps, that we hopefully don't step in the same pitfalls. So that's why we haven't taken over our own education system, because we will always be short funded on what we need in education, not what they'll give us, but what Six Nations needs are. So I see it as beneficial, and I continue to learn from them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Audrey, for your comments as well. So getting back to the resolution, then again, it's paper. Again, to approve, this is this recommendation from Greg again to approve that the Chiefs of Ontario Economic Development Committee members attend the proposed meeting at the Assembly of First Nations meeting in Ottawa. I think that's kind of now, as we've just learned from Greg recently, now there's a meeting this afternoon, which that information will flow to the committee members. So maybe at this point in time, because we will be there anyways, Greg and myself, as well as even Nate, will be during the AFN. So I think we'll definitely plan our days accordingly for that. So maybe at this point in time, we can just accept as information, and we won't look to make a political move at this point in time and still maintain and sitting at that table. So is there a mover to that effect as accepting Greg's Chiefs of Ontario Economic Development report as information at this time?
I'll move Sheridan.
Moved by Sherry Lynn, seconder. Second by Helen. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Okay, council, that does complete our political liaison agenda for today of November 28th. At this point in time, I will look for a mover and seconder.
I'll move Sherlin.
Moved by Sherry Lynn, seconded by Greg. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. And just before we sign off, I'll also want to, send our thoughts with Jonathan Steyer's family, his children, his 2 daughters, his partner Lindsay, and all of his friends. As we know, the retrial has started this morning, and I know Councilor Michelle will be going to help, support on behalf of the elected council through the retrial this afternoon. But we also will be making a statement that will be put out momentarily, so soon. So just wanted to maybe extend our thoughts and prayers to Jonathan's family and friends as they are still enduring such a hardship time. So just wanted to make those comments. That being said, I hope you all have a great Monday, and again, I look forward to our next meeting. Thank you and take care.